Northwest Insurance. Auto, business, home, and more. Who said insurance was born? Protect your car, protect your family. Northwest Insurance. If you need a helpful team, the best in the community. Grab your phone, what are you waiting for? Northwest Insurance. Northwest Insurance.
Hola, 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 and welcome back to the third episode of Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas. I'm your host, Mark Villasana, and joining me as always is my main homie, my sister from another mister. She's got that chutzpah, big and bold, the Jewish soul with the heart of gold, Miss Lila Levy. Hello, Lila. How are you doing today?
Hi, Mark. I'm good. How are you? Or shalom. How are you?
Shalom to you. I like how you're mixing that up. Where'd you? Shalom. What does that mean?
It means hello or goodbye or peace.
Well, shalom to you.
Well,
or
thank
as
you.
Archie Bunker used to say, shaboom.
Yeah,
Shaboom.
I like that reference.
Yeah, that is. I'm dating myself, but whatever. Well, you ready for number 3?
Okay, I'm ready. I'm definitely ready. I'm ready for our amazing guest. But I'm going to surprise you today because normally I have my Trenta coffee with 7 shots of espresso in it.
Right.
Not today. I walked into my favorite coffee place, saw my favorite barista. She already had a drink waiting for me. And I said, nope, I need a large unsweet tea, please.
No 7 shots today?
Not 7 shots today. Because you know why? Because our guest brings it. We don't need my caffeine.
I don't think you can handle 7-shot Lila anyway.
Maybe next time.
That's so was your barista obsessed?
She's so mad.
That's like breaking up with your dealer.
I know, she was mad.
I mean,
she was really mad. She said, next time you come in, I'm not making this drink again and you not getting it.
I mean, we're literally a couple weeks away from a 12-step program.
I don't care.
Yeah, well,
mind your business.
We do what we got to do. So how do you, I'm so impressed because of the guests you managed to pull. How do you keep pulling these rabbits out of your hat? I mean, it's all legal what you're doing, right?
It's all legal.
Okay.
It's all legal. I'm not afraid to hear the word no.
No.
Okay, I'm not, but I don't hear it very often. I'm
can't get the word in.
They can't.
I bet.
And they also know that if they do say no, I'm going to be like, okay, well, I'll call you again in like 3 weeks. So they're just like, let's, yes,
well,
yes.
It's a good thing we're on an insurance podcast and we have insurance because you're out there harassing the public to get them to come on our show. Well, we are making headway with this little podcast. Did you know that we are famous?
No. How are we famous? Come on.
I'll tell you why. Do you remember a couple weeks ago we had Elizabeth Villafranca on?
Yes.
Who was running for Farmers Branch City Council, District 4.
Yes.
She won.
Yes.
So congratulations to her.
So amazing.
But she contacted me the other day, or actually I was at the polls helping her out, and she let me know that her political opponent used a picture of our little podcast, Elizabeth, on it in a political attack ad.
There's fear. There was fear from the opponent.
I mean, we're just
well-deserved fear because she lost.
Well, it had to be because we had to put at least 2 or 3 voters over.
I think so.
Yeah,
way to go, Elizabeth. We're really happy for you.
This little insurance podcast, we're just making headways. Just changing the world with our little insurance podcast.
For all our insurance junkies.
All the insurance junkies of the world. Well, I mean, you have done it again with you guys. Week 1, we had Gordon Keith. We've dipped into the political world with Elizabeth Franca. We're going to have Victor Rojas on, who is the GM of Jose. Or used to be the former GM of Jose. And he's going to be opening up a new restaurant with who?
With Anastasia, with AX, who is AQ. AQ, thank you. She's a James Beard award-winning chef, and they're both coming from Jose, and they're opening up their new restaurant later this year.
Okay, cool. And also we're going to have Don
Weeks Spalding,
and Billy Martin Jr., who are partners. Right?
Yeah, they're partners.
What do?
They book talent. Together. They have a business together. And Dawn also is she's in charge of development for the North Dallas Chamber.
Cool.
So she's a force to be reckoned with. And we also have Martha Tiller, PR extraordinaire, coming up. Yeah. So we have a lot of dynamic guests on the docket.
I'm so impressed with all the guests. Our guest today is, I can only use the word legend, but I want to get to him real quick. We have to, because you know why? We are an insurance podcast. We unfortunately have to talk about insurance.
I know.
But today we're going to be brief. We're going to be real brief because I don't want to take up any time. from our guest. So today we're going to talk about special event insurance, Lila. And special event insurance really is a type of coverage that can protect you financially if something unexpected happens at your party, like if you're having one of your little coffee parties.
I was having a coffee rager.
Coffee Palooza 2025.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait.
So if something were to happen or someone were to get injured at your little coffee Palooza, a special event insurance would protect you financially from that. Special event insurance has a couple of caveats, which they focus on. One of them is liability coverage. And that means if someone were to get hurt or your property is damaged at your event, this insurance would help cover your medical bills, legal fees, or repair the cost. Without it, Lila, you might have to pay out of pocket. So if I were to come to your party and was in one of your bounce houses or something drinking coffee and spilled it on myself, and I was to sue Lila Enterprises, this policy would cover.
You
like
lost me a minute ago when you said a bounce house, because we all know I'm a germaphobe. So there's never going to be a bounce house at Coffee Palooza.
No.
But I hear what you're saying. You got to be careful. You got to have that event insurance. I used to work for the Met newspaper long time ago. It was around for about 6 or 7 years. And Randy Stegan, who was the founder and publisher, I remember him talking to me about like a music festival, music weekend.
Right.
He was thinking of putting on, or he had put on, and he was talking about event insurance. And I found that really fascinating because at the time, I don't know, I was 25 or 26, and that's not something that you think about. Oh, that you need event insurance. But you do, because natural occurrences like storms, tornadoes, and also insurance for, like you said, injury.
That's funny. 25 to 26 is when I really started to get into special event insurance. I was really, when it started to pique my interest. So anyway, let's get back to what it covers. It also offers cancellation protection, which means if bad weather, an emergency, or vendor issues force you to cancel your event, Lila, you can get reimbursed for the non-refundable deposits or the expenses you may have incurred. A lot of these venues will not even rent a place to you unless you have special event insurance. So when you go out there and you're looking for like a wedding venue or Coffee Palooza 2026, a lot of people are going to ask you for proof of special event insurance. Some of the cost factors in special event insurance include the size and type of event. A small wedding might cost about $100 or $200 to cover, but a large corporate event could be upwards of $1,000. So depending on the size of an event, that will determine your factor. A lot of these policies will not cover things like fireworks or bounce houses. So you might have to think of a new idea.
Okay, I'm not real worried about the bounce house thing.
So basically, in a nutshell, special event insurance is a safety net, and we use that word a lot here, to keep you from facing huge financial losses if things were to go wrong. We do need to come up with a different word
for safe. I think that's a good word. Right. I'll get on it for our next podcast. I'll come up with some alternatives.
Put it to the masses. I mean, with all the millions of people listening to the insurance podcast. Please come up with a different term for
info at nwagencies.com. Send me your ideas.
Please do. Okay, so the reason we discuss special event insurance is because of who our guest is. He has been to all kinds of special events, including the Super Bowl, where he has had the best seat in the house and has even commented on it. I don't want to give it away, so we're going to take a quick break right here, and when we come back, we'll be back with our legendary guest, Lila. You've been listening to Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas with Mark and Lila, and we will be right back.
We'll be right back.
Running a business is unpredictable, but with the right insurance, you can face the unexpected with confidence. At Northwest Insurance Agency, we protect what matters most: your people, your property, and your future. Whether it's liability, property, or workers' comp, we tailor coverage to fit your business needs. Because when you're covered, you can focus on what really matters: growing your business. Call us today for a free quote at 1-855-887-5656 or visit us at nwagencies.com. Northwest Insurance Agency, protection that works as hard as you do.
Okay, we are back on Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas with Mark and Lila. Lila, I cannot believe I'm about to do this. I'm about to introduce this gentleman. I've been watching this gentleman since I was, I can't say kid, but younger adult, since 1983. Let me get into it. This man is probably most known for being a constant in the DFW media from 1983 to 2021. But more than that, Lila, this man has lived quite a life. He served our country in the Vietnam War and began his broadcasting career in Newton, Iowa. As I mentioned, we were blessed to have him arrive in the DFW area in 1983, where he served as lead sports anchor at KDFW Channel 4. He then joined WFAA TV in 1983 and stayed there, where he ruled the media sports landscape until he retired in 2021. He has broken major sports stories which have brought down entire football programs. He has made national headlines with his stances on social issues, has won too many national awards to mention, including receiving the Radio and Television Digital News Association's Lifetime Achievement Award. Some of who other winners have included Tom Brokaw, Robin Roberts, and Charlie Rose. That just tells you how legendary this gentleman is. From having watched or listened to him since 1983, I am guessing that his biggest accomplishment is being a father and a grandfather. Ladies and gentlemen, Lila and insurance diehards, please join me in welcoming Dallas legend, Mr. Dale Hansen. Oh my gosh!
Well, I thought you had a different guest there for a while.
Oh my God! I'm in shock. I must be dreaming. Thank you so much for being here.
Let me just correct a couple of minor points, if I may.
Okay, please. Because Lila wrote it.
I love the fact. Yeah, I love the fact that you were watching me from 1983 because I actually started at Channel 4, KDFW, in 1980, and since not very many people were watching, that's probably one of the reasons they fired me when I went to WFAA. And then the other thing I find funny, it was maybe the single greatest night of my professional life was that Lifetime Achievement Award in D.C. And I was the first local broadcaster to be honored by that organization. But Charlie Rose never got that award. And for some reason, Charlie Rose has been glomming on to my coattails, claiming that, I don't know how it got on there. But
he never got that award?
Never got, but it's everywhere. Every time you see it mentioned someplace, Charlie Rose is listed. It's the most amazing thing. I literally broke down in tears when I got the call because it was Andy Rooney was the first recipient of the award. Then it was Bob Simon and Bill Plant, two humongous legendary stars from CBS back in the 60s and 50s and early 70s. Then I believe the fourth one was Tom Brokaw. The fifth one was Nina Totenberg, who covers the Supreme Court for National Public Radio and the like for 50 years. And then Robin Roberts the year before me. That was the list. And I sat there and I went, Tom Brokaw, Robin Roberts, Nina Totenberg, Bill Simon, Bob Plant, Andy Rooney, and me? What the hell's wrong with this picture? I mean, it was a staggering thing, but it was an interesting life. Let's put it that way. It was an interesting life.
Well, I would not sell yourself short. In my opinion, you definitely belong up there. I mean, you've been so influential in my life. And I'll get into it here with all these questions Lila provided for me. So if there are any more errors, let's blame Lila.
Always.
I must say, though, I was intrigued when you were talking about your event insurance.
Yeah.
I needed to be doing this podcast about 40 years ago because I had this. Well, you weren't talking about legendary. I don't think I am, but my party certainly was.
Yes. Yeah.
And I did this party for 25 years. Started out with, it was a carryover from Newton, Iowa. And now picture this, my first job in broadcasting was in Newton, Iowa. And a woman named Myrtle Levine became the mayor of that city, primarily because of my reporting. I didn't do anything wrong. I just interviewed her opponent. And her opponent was an idiot. And he made the comment about Myrtle Levine that I just think the little lady should stay in the kitchen baking cookies where all women should be. And that pretty much ended his campaign. Yeah. And at that time in the city of Newton, they had, I forget what they called it, it was like a board of guys, all older white guys. And they would say, okay, Bob, it's your turn to be mayor. Larry, it's your turn to be mayor. And they picked this guy for whatever reason. And this woman, Myrtle Levine, who was a Harvard graduate and a lawyer in Newton, decided that she would challenge it. And she was just a fabulous woman. I interviewed her. I interviewed the mayor. She won convincingly. So she calls me. She said, we're having a big party and you need to come. Now, where I come from in Iowa, when you're invited to a party, the first question is, well, what do I bring? Do I bring the beer? Do I bring the chips? Do I bring whatever? She said, oh, goodness, no, you don't bring anything. I thought, oh, what a stupid party this is going to be, right? I mean, I never heard of I swear to you, I never heard of such a thing. I get to the house, there's people waiting on you. They're bringing you drinks. They've got beer. They got mixed drinks. They got champagne. They've got buffet set up for. And I walked up to her and I said, someday, and the guy's making like $100 a week back in those days. I said, someday I'm going to do this. I'm going to throw a party and people just come to my house. It took about 10 years, 1982. The lovely Mrs. Hansen and I threw a party at our house and 14 people showed up. The next year, we had 44 people, and we had hot dogs and chicken on the grill. The third year, I thought, we need a band. So we moved the party to the Trophy Club swimming pool, and we had a band. And about 10 years, 15 years later, we had over 1,000 people in my yard. We had one woman who wanted to go down to the barn and see the horses, got kicked in the chest. We had another woman fell off the deck. We had another guy walk into the pasture to get to his car in the dark and broke his ankle. Oh, and the worst one of all was that we had a guy named Jason D. Williams playing the piano. And people need to Google this guy because he's just fabulous. He's like Jerry Lee Lewis on steroids. I mean, it's unbelievable. At the end of his deal, he would put all the women up on the piano and they'd be dancing on top of his piano while he's just rocking away. So I'm lifting them all up and everybody just going crazy. This young gal, and I built a band stage just for the party. And it had like 3 steps going up to it. And then the backyard was bulldozed down. So no matter where you're sitting, you're looking down into the music pit. As I go to lift the woman down, she does a flip off the piano. She apparently was like a high school gymnast. She does a flip off the piano, catches her heel on one of the steps, and slams face first into my cement dance floor that we had built. And as I said when I got back on stage, I walked up. She bounced right up. Just bounced. I thought she's dead. I mean, her head just snapped. Oh. And as I got back up on stage, everybody's still kind of in shock. It was that scary. And I said, the first thing that entered my mind is we're going to have to wash off all the blood before anybody can continue dancing. And the second thought that entered my mind was next year's party will be at my apartment in Mesquite because she's going to own this place. My friend Eric Moyer was a lawyer at the time and is a judge now. And he did every year. He's like, you have got to get insurance. And I'm telling you, I'm not promoting you for the benefit of me being on your podcast.
This word brought to you by Dale Hansen.
I'm telling you, it is absolutely. And I was sitting there, how much is that? In hindsight, oh my gosh, it was the stupidest thing ever. Because, I was thinking, I hate to pay for insurance right up until I need it.
Yeah.
And I lucked out by far. I lucked out, but it could have been. I could have lost everything on more than one occasion.
I want to make sure we got all that. We can edit that into a commercial. I should have got insurance.
Well, you understand it. That was kind of frustrating. It's a little bit frustrating. When I retired in 21, I really did think I'd be doing a lot of commercials. I really did. Now, I wasn't going to necessarily do commercials for linoleum floors or whatever, but I could see myself doing a lot of legitimate commercials. And nothing. Almost everybody retires from television. Right. Troy Dungan's doing a bunch of commercials. George Reba's doing commercials. And I really was arrogant enough to think, well, sure. And a guy actually said to me one time, you're a very hard person to have because you're incredibly polarizing. And people either really like you or half the audience really can't stand you. And when it comes to advertising, we don't like to run that risk. So I've done no commercials.
Wow.
And I really thought I'd supplement that because that pension doesn't go quite as far as you'd like to think it would.
Can you see the big light bulb over my head?
Yeah, I've had a lot of thoughts in the last 2 or 3 minutes.
Wow.
Well, I'm your guy.
That is,
I'm available.
that's our guy.
He's already got
That's our guy.
He already has the copy down. He already knows what to say.
job.
I should have had insurance.
You're gonna lay me off
Yeah,
tomorrow.
but
aren't you?
then I gave you a
Dale?
freebie there for that. That was just a taster for you.
That was just a
taster.
teaser. That was just audition, if you will.
Yes.
I do want to talk about something that's very important to me because my father was served in the Army during the Vietnam era.
Yeah,
and he didn't serve in combat. He didn't see combat, but he served in that time, and I know it affected you greatly. Most notably, you told a story about how one of your best friends passed
Carol
away.
Meyer. Yeah.
I'd like to know how deeply did serving the Vietnam War still affect you?
Oh,
today?
it changed my whole life.
Yeah.
I mean, let me also clarify something there. I'm always introduced, and a lot of people think when they say, "Well, I served during Vietnam."
During.
I didn't serve in Vietnam.
Same thing with my father. I understand.
And because in all seriousness, I was in the Navy, and I was never once voted as Sailor of the Month. I made, for those who know, with any military understanding at all, I was in the Navy for 3 years. They had a thing called the Kiddie Cruise. And a buddy of mine named Donnie Collins, never forget it. We're in high school biology class. And he said, I found this new deal. Because neither one of us were going to go to college. And he said, we don't want to get drafted and go to the Army. And we don't want to go to the Air Force or the Navy because you had to serve 4 years, which looking back, 4 years when you're 18 years old that seems like forever. And he found this thing. They called it the Kiddie Cruise. And you could go to the Navy for 3 years. And you got all the same benefits and all the same perks. But you knocked a year off your service time. But you had to go in before you turned 18, and then you got out before you turned 21. So he and I both graduated at the age of 17. I didn't turn 18 until August. So I graduated in late May of 1966, and I was in boot camp 10 days later in Great Lakes, Michigan, or Great Lakes, Illinois, and served during Vietnam. And although I wasn't much of a sailor, I did make E4 twice, which those who know will know that's not exactly a badge of honor. But I got in a little trouble along the way, and I hated the Navy. And partly I hated the service because, as you mentioned, my best friend, Carol Meyer, was this unbelievable baseball player that I played with from the time we were 5. And the last time I saw him, I still tear up thinking about this. The last time I saw him, he graduated a year ahead of me, and he knocks on my window. I had a basement bedroom, and he knocks on my window, wakes me up like 12:30 in the morning. And we're sitting in my dad's driveway, and we're drinking a couple of beers. And he said, well, I just wanted to say goodbye. And I thought, what are you talking about? He said, well, I'm headed off to the Army, and you're going to go to the Navy, and we're never going to see each other again. And I thought, well, why would you say such a stupid thing? Well, you have to understand, Carol Meyer was one of the greatest athletes I've ever known in my life, the best third baseman I've ever seen in my life, and the slowest man who ever walked the planet Earth. He hit like 5'10" his senior year, and the right fielder threw him out like half a dozen times because he hit the ball so hard and he ran so slow that the right fielder picked it up and threw him out. He played third base, 90-foot bases. He played about 80 feet down the line because if they bunted, he'd never get, if he played the normal spot. And I was a catcher. And the few times that I would hear this crack of a bat, which didn't happen a lot because we had a great pitcher, my first impulse always was, my God, I hope they hit that ball to third base. Because I knew if they did, it was never going into left field.
Correct.
When we would take infield practice before the games, I actually said to Gene Evans one time, could we have some music for this? We needed like Sweet Georgia Brown. Because Gene would hit these bullets to third base. And I could throw pretty good as a catcher. And we would just put on this exhibition during infield. Hell, we were up 2-0 before the game even started. Yeah. I mean, the kids in the other dugout were looking at us like, we can't beat that. And Carol was just fabulous. But the slowest man who ever walked the planet Earth. We're sitting there drinking beer. I said, how stupid? I said, you're going to come back. I'm going to take over my dad's trucking company. You're going to take over your dad's gas station. We're going to manage the Little League baseball teams. I said, we'll probably live here like everybody did back in Logan, Iowa, back in those days. Forever. And I'll never forget it. He looks at me and says, if I can't outrun a base hit to right, how could I possibly outrun a bullet in Vietnam? Never forget it.
Yeah.
Never forget it.
Yeah.
And a year later or thereabouts, he was killed in Vietnam. And the Navy wouldn't even let me go back home for the funeral. Every time I've been into D.C., I go to the wall. He's the fourth wall in, the third row name up from the bottom of the row. And it changed my whole life.
Yeah.
Not all for the better. Quite frankly, I lost what religion I had. I just walked away from it. It just changed everything about me. Changed everything about who I am. I personally think a lot of it for the better. But it was one of the reasons that led to the divorce with my first wife, because we were both high school sweethearts. And she didn't change.
Yeah.
And I did a 180. And that was the beginning of the end. They had to cut. We had a little apartment outside the base. We didn't have a phone. I was making like $94 a month. People find this hard to believe, but it's true. I was making like $94 a month with a little subsistence kick in to, if I was married, to live off base. Didn't even have a phone. Couldn't afford it. And a buddy drove out and said, your parents want you to call home. Well, I figured that one of my grandparents died or something. And my dad, who was one of the toughest, strongest men I've ever known in my life, never seen him cry, starts choking up and said, I'm going to put your mom on. And then my mom says, they killed Carol in Vietnam. Carol was killed. And I about tore the phone booth down and slammed the phone and walked away and never looked back.
My father shares a similar story that he speaks often of a friend he lost. He didn't serve combat either. Yeah. And he had a similar story where he didn't avoid the draft, but he joined the reserves like the week before he was going to get drafted. Right. Was able to avoid seeing combat.
Think about that. I'm from a town of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
1,000 people. There's 59 kids in my graduating class. And it was the largest graduating class they ever had. We had 2 kids killed in Vietnam. One guy was like 3 years older than me, a guy named Dennis Waterman. Played ball with him. Carol, of course, my very close friend. And then we had 4 guys get shot. From a county that might have only had 3,000, right? People who aren't old enough to remember, that's why I look like at the political environment we live in today, which I think, as you well know, is abhorrent to me. And I did a commentary about this, that people were saying, well, this is like the worst thing I've ever seen. And then I just went back through the decades.
Yeah.
And I said, you mean as compared to boom. You mean as compared to boom. But I don't think it was ever, again, going back to the Civil War, I would argue. And certainly
we don't know. I still say it might be worse today.
Well, yeah, it's up there. Yeah. But I think certainly in my life, and I stopped in the late 40s with this commentary. And I had a lot of people write, well, you didn't even mention World War II, and you didn't mention the Depression. I said, well, I have no idea what that was really like, only what I've read or seen on the History Channel. I'm talking about the decades that I've lived. But without question, I'm 76 years old, and without question, the 60s were the worst thing I've ever seen.
Wow.
It was the scariest, craziest, wildest time. I mean, John Kennedy gets killed. Martin Luther King gets killed. Malcolm X gets killed. George Wallace gets shot. I mean, the civil rights they were burning down cities all over America. We were arguing about how we were going to treat people of color, whether we were going to allow them to be citizens, basically, of this country. I mean, the upheaval that we had in the 60s, I find it hard to believe that it was other than the Civil War, of course. I find it hard to believe that it was a whole lot harder. Yeah. But I'm sure it was. And then as much as I hate the environment and the world and the country that we live in today with what's taking place, that's the only thing that does kind of keep me sane, is that we survived all of those times, going back to the Civil War, going back to the Depression, going back to World War I and World War II, the race riots of the 60s, the impeachment of a president in the 70s, the financial collapse of 2008, et cetera. We've survived all of that. But I don't know if we survived this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a part of me that I don't know if we survived this. But what keeps me sane is, well, we've survived everything else, so maybe we will.
Well, that's a good,
but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I want to talk about that more, and I also want to get into you and your stance on a lot of different social issues. But let's take a quick break here. Take a break from our sponsor. Who's our sponsor again?
Northwest Insurance Agency.
Okay. Take a quick break for and hear a word from them. You've been listening to Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas with Mark and Lila, and we will be back with the legendary Dale Hansen.
In the heart of Dallas, we know that life moves fast. And when it does, you need an insurance company that's as reliable as the city we call home. At Northwest Insurance Agency, we're proud to be a part of the Dallas community, offering customized coverage to protect your home, your car, and your family. Whether you're navigating downtown or enjoying a weekend in the suburbs, we've got you covered every step of the way. We're more than just an insurance company. We're your Dallas neighbor, always here to help. Northwest Insurance, proudly serving Dallas.
Okay, we are back on Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas with Mark and Lila. We are here with Dale Hansen, and we were talking about his time of serving in the military during the Vietnam War. I mentioned you, Dale, about how deeply it affected my father. He feels the same way you did. He was able to avoid serving combat like you were. The joke around my family is, how long will it take Papa to talk about Vietnam? And how will he correlate? And we could be watching Rudy and he brings Vietnam somehow. Right? But obviously that impacted you a lot. Do you think that is one of the reasons you started becoming so vocal on a lot of these social issues on your cast?
Well, that and the whole military experience.
Yeah.
I mentioned to you guys earlier that I was married when I was 19 years old to the girl I was dating in high school, and I was, believe it or not, I was a very conservative guy. I wrote a speech my senior year of high school called "Let's Face the Facts: Negroes Are Just Plain Troublemakers." And I was the only one in my class that used the definition or the term Negroes. Everybody else just dropped the N-word.
Right.
And a guy by the name of Frank Weiland was an English teacher who again is also responsible for who I am, looked at me and said, "That might be the biggest pile of garbage I've ever heard, but I'm going to give you an A- for your presentation. And I hope that someday you learn." I get to the military. We're sitting in Patuxent River, Maryland. We're in a bar. And most of my stories begin with I was in a bar. But we're sitting here. For those people who remember, they used to have the old jukeboxes in the booth, and you put it in like a dime and you flip the pages, you play songs. So there's like 6 of us jammed into this booth. And we're playing our Beatles music and the Rolling Stones and whatever. And we're laughing. We're flirting with the waitress. We're slamming down shooters and drinking beer. We're loud and obnoxious as can be. And all of a sudden, these 6 black guys walk in the other side of the bar, which is obviously where everybody was split. And all of a sudden, this buddy of mine looks at me and he goes, "Can you believe this? Look at those N-words." And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" He goes, "Look at him." He said, "My God, they're drinking like hell. They're loud. They're flirting with the waitress. They're singing to the damn music." And I swear to you, it's like this epiphany just washes over me. And I look at him, I go, "You mean like us?" And I'm not denying that alcohol might have played a role, but I got up and I walked across, which is not like walking across a bridge in Selma, but it's a walk. And I walked up to the guys and I said, "Do you mind if I join you?" And they're like, "What the hell you want to join us for?" And I said, "Well, because I like Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson and James Brown a little better than that nonsense over there." And for the rest of my time, I became known as the guy that ran with all the black guys. And I always did, for whatever reason. And when I got put on a ship out of Virginia, I'm hanging with the black guys. We come home from that cruise that we took down through the Caribbean. That was my big excursion in the military. When I got in trouble at Patuxent River, Maryland, they said, "We're going to put you on the worst ship we can find." And they basically succeeded. Put me on the USS York County. It was a flat bottom LSD, roughest thing I've ever been on in my life. But we spent about 5.5 months cruising around San Juan, Puerto Rico, doing military exercises during the winter of 1968 and 69. We came back. My buddies helped me sneak off the ship. And we went to my apartment, and I had like these 5 black buddies of mine that I'd been hanging out with in Puerto Rico and everything. We were cooking up hot dogs and hamburgers and drinking all night. I take them back to the ship. I come back. My ex-wife has thrown everything out. All the glasses, all the plates, all the silverware. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, what is this? And she goes, well, you don't expect me to eat off this again, do you? And I look at her and I'm like, well, we've got issues. And I changed to give her somewhat the benefit of the doubt, which eventually ended in a divorce, obviously. I wasn't the man she married. And as I always tell the story, to be fair to her, I wasn't the man that she married. But to be fair to me, she was still the woman that I married.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that woman in my life anymore.
Yeah.
But I changed, and the military changed me, and my time in the military changed me. And while I didn't like the military per se, and I didn't obviously like anything about the Vietnam War, I'm really glad that I went, because it got me out of the bubble that I grew up in, exposed me to a whole nother world that I'd only read about and gotten the distorted images of, I was the guy that thought, well, of course Lester Maddox should be allowed to tell people they can't eat in his restaurant. It's his restaurant. These kids don't need to go to that college. I mean, they're many of them are flunking out, leaving out the part that they were beaten up on the way to class. Their homework was torn up. People were defecating in their dorm rooms.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that part.
Yeah.
I just thought, well, you stood on the courthouse steps to get into that university, and then you flunk out. Well, why bother? Why? In my white privileged world, I'm thinking at that time, well, I don't really want to go any place that I'm not wanted. But then again, I was welcome every place. Mm-hmm. But I didn't understand why somebody would, why would you take a beating to eat at Walgreens, for goodness sakes? I mean, who the hell wants to eat at Walgreens anyway? And yet these young people took this beating because they wanted to sit at the counter of Walgreens because they weren't allowed to sit at the counter at Walgreens. But in my bubble, they were just troublemakers. Yeah. They were just troublemakers. And as I said on a commentary that I did on Channel 8, my dad used the N-word like it was a proper noun. I never did. Now, that's always been kind of an intrigue. My sister and I were talking about this just about a month and a half ago, as a matter of fact. I don't know why or how I avoided that. I like to think that maybe deep down I had the decency to understand something that my dad wasn't.
That was kind of one of my questions. Where do you think you got that from? Because seems like you've always gone against the grain. Where did that come from?
I don't know. I think I give you another example of what a crazy world I grew up in. We had one black family in the town, and this was also part of the commentary that I wrote about my upbringing and my dad. And my dad is Roy Matthews and Billy Matthews family, and they're an unbelievable family. My dad just loved it. When there was an issue, my dad was always the one who ran to the defense of Roy and Billy Matthews. But he referred to all the people of color that he didn't know with the N-word. And I said to him when I got a little bit older one time, I said, well, how is it possible that you only know one family of color and you love them? I mean, you just respect and love them. But all the people of color that you don't know, you refer to, Elston Howard and Willie Mays with the N-word. He goes, the Matthews are different. The Matthews are different. And as I said in my commentary, that ignorant thinking will twist your mind if you allow it. And it twisted mine. It twisted mine for a long time. I've thought about this 1,000 times, Mark. I promise you. I don't know how or why, other than I loved Willie Mays, for example. I loved Henry Aaron. I loved Bill Russell, the Boston Celtics basketball player. Most of the people of color that I knew were in the entertainment industry in some fashion, and so I had a natural affection for their talents and skills. Thinking, as we're on the bus in Woodbine, Iowa, Billy Matthews, the son, was a year behind me, and he was a horrible football player. He was just a horrible football player. And Glenn Brewer, at halftime, we actually had a bus. And my former high school football coach, guy named Glenn Brewer, looks at Billy and says, how the hell is it possible that I finally get, and he drops the N-word, I finally get an N-word on my team and the SOB can't play.
It's terrible.
And I sat there and I thought, yeah, why is that? Because they're all fast. They're all talented. They're all gifted. And, but I never went completely to the dark side. And I don't know why, other than, like I say, when I got in the Navy and I just kind of liked some of the music, got to meet some other guys, got to have a good time. And then it just started changing in a hurry. I mean, it really started changing in a hurry. And thank God it did. And I've never looked back.
Oh, I think some people are just born to impact others. And I think you might have just been one of those people, Dale, because of such impact you've had through the commentaries you've been able to come out with. So tell me, you served in the Vietnam War, and then what brought you into the broadcasting world? How'd that transition happen?
Well, it's kind of a strange story too. I've always felt like I'm arrogant enough to believe that I can do just about any job you put in front of me, but I just can't do it 8 to 5 with a break for lunch. I just can't stand the corporate world. So I get out of the Navy, didn't go to college, always had this dream of being a disc jockey was my real goal. From the time I was a little kid, I was never that kid that supposedly sat in the bedroom and spun records on an old phonograph or some nonsense that people always claim they did. But I did listen to the radio differently than every teenager I've ever known. I listened to the disc jockey. Johnny Carson was my idol on his late night TV show. I was studying his monologue and how he delivered his punchlines and the like. But never thinking that I could do it. So I had 4 different jobs when I got out of the Navy. Typical business type jobs. Quit the first one because of a race situation. I was a bill collector for Dial Finance. And Stephen Veach was the general manager, and they had changed the law, so he had us put an X in the corner if it was a person of color, if they applied for a loan, which I refused to do. And I flipped this kid who was going to the University of Nebraska at Omaha, an engineering student. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I flipped him into a bigger loan. Stephen Veach, I checked all his credit, all his references. Stephen Veach is congratulating me for this great job. The kid comes in to pick up his money, and Stephen Veach looks at me and says, "You didn't tell me he was evil." And he goes, "There's no X on the application." And I said, "Oh, I'm sure I did," knowing that I hadn't. And he walks up to the kid and says, we can't make you the loan. The kid had never missed a payment. He was borrowing money from Dial Finance at like 25% interest.
What year is this?
Oh, this is 1970.
Okay.
And borrowed money from Dial Finance at these incredibly high rates because nobody else would loan him money to pay his way through college. And the kid got out the front door, and there's a big glass front to Dial Finance, and he turned and looked back at me, and I swear to you, I could draw a picture of him today. I could draw a picture of him today, and if you were looking for him, you could find him. And I got up, and I walked back to Stephen Veach's little corner, and I said, I quit. And I go home to that redneck racist wife of mine, and I tell her that I've quit because of this, and now she's gone ballistic. Then I became a food salesman, and I got an employment agency counseling job, and I was the bill collector again for the University of Nebraska hospitals. And I got fired from those last 3 because, again, I can do a job. I just can't do it 8 to 5 with a lunch break. And I run into this Frank Weiland, the English teacher I was telling you about. We're at a bar in Logan, Iowa, and he said, "Why aren't you in radio?" He said, "That's all you ever talked about in high school, was that you were going to be a disc jockey." And I said, "Well, I can't do that." And he said, "Well, of course you can do that." He said, you just have to try. That very night, and again, I'm not a religious person, but I've always had this angel on my shoulder. That very night, I go home. I'm lying on the floor in the front room at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and right before the national anthem and the jet flyover starts to play, a commercial comes on. If you sound like this, you can make millions of dollars in the fabulous world of broadcasting. I think, hell, I think I sound like that. And it was a school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin called Career Academy. And it was a rip-off deal.
Basketball powerhouse, aren't they?
What's that?
They're a basketball powerhouse, aren't they?
I thought, I can do that. So I called him. The only time in my life that I've ever experienced what you would consider nerves or nervous, the man on the phone says to me, go grab the newspaper and read it to me. And I'm thinking this is basically my audition. Basically, to find out later that the audition was really, does your check clear?
Yeah.
If the check clears, you're in. So but I read this thing, and I can't hardly breathe because I'm thinking and I'm reading the newspaper. He goes, oh, you sound fantastic. Yeah, we'll take you. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm on my way. I get to the school. I'm there. It was like a 4-month school. Not bad. I mean, it taught me some of the very basics. But then Newton, Iowa calls, and they were looking for a new disc jockey. And I was only 3 months into this 4-month school, and the guy comes to me, and I really was like the best student they had because I knew this was my last shot. So, I mean, I spent all my time practicing and studying and doing everything. I was like 23, 24 at this point, and all the other guys were like 18 right out of high school. But I was acing everything. So they come to me and they said, well, there's a station in Iowa that we want you to apply for. And I said, yeah, but I haven't even finished the school. They said, yeah, but you're good. You've learned enough.
You placed out.
Plus, the real goal was for them to place people in jobs. And they thought, with your Iowa connections, it might work. And I started there. I went there and I applied for the job and I got it. And $94 a week. And I was spinning records in the afternoon for 4 hours. I had a 1 to 5 o'clock radio shift. And about 3 months into that job, I thought, this might be the worst job in the world. I mean, my dream has finally come true. And I realized this might be the worst job in the world. Because this was before all the radio disc jockeys had like these ensembles, right? Yeah. So I'm just in a little private room by myself, smoking about 9,000 cigarettes and drinking Diet Cokes, trying to stay awake, and then same song day after day after day. And I'm just ready to swallow a bullet. I mean, I can't do it. Once again, here comes the angel. And the guy named Dave Reek, and it's kind of amazing to me that I still remember a lot of these names, but they changed my life, so I guess I should. People. Dave Reek was the news anchor, and he quit to take a job in someplace in Nebraska. And John Carl was the owner of the station, and he comes to me and he said, listen, I know you're not happy as a disc jockey. How about would you like to be the news anchor? And I thought, why not? I mean, why not? Mainly just out of boredom with the radio disc jockey job. And well, it pays like an extra $20 a month. And, I thought, oh, wow, we're up to like 115 or something. And I became the news anchor and it just exploded. I mean, it just became the coolest time of my life. So I'm doing news primarily, sports on the side.
And you're still like 24? You're still like 24?
Oh, yeah, I'm 25, maybe 24, okay. 25. And it's the greatest thing. There was I don't remember her name, but I always called her the bag lady. This woman went to every school board meeting, every city council meeting, and she was crazy. I mean, she was like, the only thing missing was the tin foil on her head. But so everybody just ignored her. I mean, because she knew everything about the city. But she was crazy. And she saw a conspiracy behind every closed door. Every contract was fraudulent. I mean, but I just kind of got a kick out of her for whatever reason. I'll give you the best example of all. She comes to me and says, the nursing home, the nursing home is doing all this illegal stuff. And I'm like, what? She goes, well, they're sterilizing the female patients and they're raping the female patients. And one woman walked out of the hospital and walked right onto the interstate. It was right on Interstate 80 through Iowa, and killed herself because she was being raped by the orderlies at the nursing home. It was nursing home / mental facility. Yeah. The county supervisors were ripping off the money. They were charging like 90 cents a pound for the beef and buying like 40-cent beef. And she's telling me all this. I literally met a nurse in a cornfield in Iowa, flashing my headlights at her as she flashes her headlights back. I then walk through the corn rows to get to her car, and she hands me all the documents. And it was all true.
Wow.
I mean, they arrested the supervisors, they arrested the orderlies, and then I got sued. Then the job offers come in. I had left. I had taken another job, and the Des Moines Register picked up my stories, which is the state like the Dallas Morning News of Iowa.
Yeah.
And they sued the radio station, the Des Moines Register, and me because the mother of one of the girls who had been raped and sterilized didn't like the fact that we exposed it, which I thought was a bit of a strange lawsuit, but I thought they should have been thanking me. But then they eventually dropped me from the lawsuit because they knew I didn't have any money.
Right.
And I'm not even sure how it ended up, quite honestly. But this little old lady was just crazy. But every so often, the county attorney was a guy named Ken Whitehead. He would have young women arrested and charged with, drug charges and the like. And then he would offer, if you give me sex, I'll drop the charges. So we sent one of these young women in with a tape recorder, and we recorded him demanding sex to drop the charges. And off he goes.
You're a big name after this.
Oh, huge. I mean, it was the Peyton Place of America, for those old enough to remember that. I mean, Newton, Iowa was a cesspool of corruption. I mean, it was, and this is how part of that same time was this story. Mert Levine became the first female mayor of anything resembling a major city in Iowa in, what was this, like 1971, 72. And I was this hotshot guy that was breaking all these stories when, quite frankly, it was that tinfoiled woman who was breaking most of them. But I got all these job offers.
So I should be talking to her right now then.
Yeah, I should be. Yeah. Well, it'd be hard to carry on a conversation. But in all seriousness, I get hired away. Well, they thought I was going to go right in and just start. Well, one, it doesn't work that way. And two, I didn't have the sources anymore. And so I bounced around for, about a year and a half, basically failing at my radio news jobs because they hired me under the assumption that I was just going to break these.
You were the Geraldo Rivera of the time. Yeah.
And I didn't. I mean, I just didn't. For a lot of different reasons. Same thing. I get fired from 3 radio jobs in a row. I'm unemployed in Omaha, Nebraska, dating a girl at the time. Tried every job I could find. Couldn't get anything. And she said, why don't you apply for a TV job? She goes, I know you've always wanted to be on TV. And I thought, how would I do that? So just to kind of satisfy her, I called the station that I watched, KMTV in Omaha, Nebraska. I get a guy on the phone, Mark Gatier was the news director. And I said, yeah, I'd like to talk to you about a job. He said, sure, come on in. Okay, I walk in. He goes, yeah, I know you. I listened to Coil Radio, which is where I was before I got fired. He said, a lot of my reporters talk about you. You're very aggressive at the city council meetings and the school board meetings. And, we're familiar with your work. Really? And he goes, so where'd you go to school? And I said, Logan, Iowa. He goes, no, I know, but where'd you go, for your formal education? And I said, Logan, Iowa. And he goes, no, you have to go to
basketball school?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Career Academy wasn't going to do it. And he said, oh, my gosh. He said, Dale, you have to have a degree. I mean, you have to have a college degree, preferably in journalism, but we don't hire anybody without a college degree. And I promise you this is a true story. I've told it a million times, but it's still, once again, this angel pops up. So I'm just sitting there kind of picking his brain as to where I might find a job. And his phone rings. And again, on my sainted mother's grave, it went down just like this. His weekend sports anchor, a guy named Dave Weber, quit. He was going to move to Idaho and work in construction with his father-in-law. Mark Gatier slammed the phone down. He's so frustrated. And he looked at me and said, hey, and again, I'm like 26 now, 27, maybe, something like that. He said, hey, kid, do you like sports? And I went, yeah, I love sports. I love sports. He goes, how would you like to be the weekend sportscaster? And I said to him, well, I'd love to. I'm just basically looking for a job. And I said, but I thought everybody who works here has to have a college degree. And Mark Gatier looks at me. He says, not to be a sportscaster. You don't need any education at all for that job. And I eventually get hired. We did the audition and, long story, but I eventually get hired. And here we are.
Incredible. And I'm assuming after that you go to Dallas, and we'll get into that after we take a quick break and a word from our sponsor. More with Dale Hansen here in a moment. You've been listening to Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas with Mark and Lila, and we'll be right back.
And our sponsor is Northwest Insurance Agency.
Thank you.
In Texas, the road is part of who we are. From Dallas traffic to Hill Country back roads, you need coverage that keeps up. At Northwest Insurance Agency, we're proud to serve Texans with the best home, auto and business insurance paired with honest rates, real protection, and local agents who understand life around here. Call us for a quote at 1-855-887-5656 or visit us at nwagencies.com.
Okay, we are back on Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas with Mark and Lila. We've been talking to Dallas legend Dale Hansen. Dale, you were telling us about how you ended up in Nebraska. If you could tell us real quickly how you ended up. You ended up here in Dallas on Channel 4, and then you transitioned over to Channel 8. If you don't mind expanding on that.
I'll try to do it as quick as I can. But I was working in Omaha, Nebraska, and a guy by the name of Bill Wilson fired me in Omaha, Nebraska. A bit of a contract dispute. I was accused of beating up a producer. One of the last things I said to Bill Wilson was, look at him. Does it look like I beat him up? Because I didn't. And he then just reaches into the drawer and hands me a letter and says, I'm fired. About 4 or 5 months later, I get a call. I had a headhunter in New York City. And this is how naive and stupid I was. She died of lung cancer, and she talked that way her whole life. So when I called this woman, and her name was Shirley Berries. He's like, all right, what kind of a job are you looking for? Well, I didn't have any audition tapes because I never thought I was going to leave Omaha, Nebraska. It just didn't occur to me that I'd ever get out of Omaha, Nebraska. So I didn't keep tapes like a lot of people do. So the only tape I had was a buddy of mine named Paul Young, and he was a director, and he had a tape that I happened to do at the boat show in Omaha, Nebraska, where I was wearing a KMTV jacket, and I wrestled a bear. And she says to me, what kind of a job do you want? You're not a bad-looking kid, but you look like you're pumping gas at a standard gas station with that stupid jacket. I said, well, that's all I got. She said, well, let me see if I can do something with it. About a month goes by. She calls me. She goes, I've got a job interview for you in Dallas. I'm like, and I did. I swear I went.
No, they're talking about you or the bear.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the bear played a big part. And I did. I said, Dallas, Texas? Oh, my God, how many Dallases do you know, for God's sake? Okay. I'm going to Dallas, Texas. Now, my whole goal, once I got into television, was to work in a warm weather major league city. Miami, San Diego, LA, Dallas, and Phoenix would have been fine, whatever. I wanted to move out of the Midwest. I wanted to move to a warm weather city, major league market. Dallas was perfect. So I come down. They put in a tape of the great Vern Lundquist, who dominated this market for 15, 20 years.
Yes.
And they put this tape in. Now, keep in mind, I'm unemployed. And I said, can you do this? And I looked at the tape. And I said, well, I could, but I won't. And I mean, they just went into shock. I said, guys, you've been trying to hire Vern Lundquist light all these years. Even if you found him, why would anybody switch to Dial? I said, you got to offer them a complete alternative choice. So John McKay was the general manager, not the John McKay I worked with at Channel 8, but a different John McKay. And he's leaning up against the wall. He goes, so what would you do? I said, well, I would cover high school sports. I would do a lot of live remote shots. I do a lot of funny nonsense. I would give people an alternative. I wouldn't bore them with ball scores and whatever. I'd just have a little more fun. And he looks at me and goes, would you wrestle a bear? And I said, well, I tell you what, you find a bear, I'll wrestle it. And I go, what the hell are the odds? What are the odds? So they hire me, and about 2 months later, I'm wrestling a bear. And that really was the beginning of kind of making people sit up and take notice. I mean, who wrestles a bear? And Vern, I think, just hated it. Everybody at Channel 8 thought I was a complete clown. Ed Bark, who was the leading critic in the Dallas Morning News, thought I was an absolute clown. But I was in many ways, because I was competing against, it was the highest compliment I could pay Vern. I don't think he ever took it that way, but it truly was. The highest compliment I could pay Vern was, I'm going to be as opposite of you as I can be to give people a choice.
Yeah.
Because I know I can't compete with that. Even if I could compete with that, well, nobody's going to turned to me anyway.
Right.
A couple of years, things are going halfway decent. Channel 4 moves to number 1 in the ratings. Things are feeling kind of sweet. I'm getting a little bit of pub for some of the nonsense I was doing. And the next thing you know, they hire Bill Wilson from Omaha, Nebraska as my boss again. And he fires me again. And I end up at Channel 8. And I end up at Channel 8. They had a guy already hired that same day. That same day that I got fired, Channel 8 hired a guy from Alabama, but a guy named Terry Ford, the station manager, wanted to talk to me. Wednesday, I go in, I interview with Marty Haig, the great, maybe the best news director of local television ever.
He was there forever, wasn't he?
Yeah, long time. He built Channel 8, the news department. I mean, it is unbelievable. And as Marty said in the paper after they hired me, well, I thought Dale Hansen would walk in with hand grenades and a pistol strapped to his belt.
And the bear.
Yeah, but he really kind of has a pretty good understanding of what he's doing and why. And the same argument. I was unemployed, and Marty Haig looks at me and goes, what would you do if we hired you at Channel 8? And I said, well, I wouldn't do what I did at Channel 4. I'd do some. But I said, you've got Jerry Orr, who's the funniest, greatest guy going there. And I said, but when Jerry's not on, I'd probably do something goofy. I wouldn't do all the ball scores that you do. I don't like wasting my time with a full screen of ball scores. And I'd fire Bud Fotopoulos, who was a network voice that Vern used to just say, the Cubs are playing the Braves today, and here's Bud Fotopoulos. And he's like in a studio in Chicago just narrating the highlights. It was kind of stupid. But a lot of people do it, or did back then. And Marty Haig looks at me. I'll never forget this either. And again, keeping in mind, I'm unemployed. And Marty Haig looks at me and says, our consultants have been telling us that for a couple of years now.
Wow.
And I looked at Marty and I said, you've got very good consultants.
Wow. That is awesome. So
Here's I'm sorry, but I'll leave this final thought. I'll put a bow on this. This is the arrogance that I think people have always thought they see in me. I don't think I'm as arrogant and egotistical as a lot of people think I am. I'm just incredibly comfortable with the hand that I've been dealt. I've got mirrors in my house. I'm not happy with a lot of things in my life. I'm definitely not happy with me and haven't been for about 35 of my 76 years. But I accept the skin that I live in, and I accept the hand that I was dealt. And I think a lot of people perceive that as arrogance and egotistical attitude. But as I also tell people, maybe I am so arrogant and egotistical that I don't think I am.
Yeah.
I don't realize that I am. But this is my claim to absolute arrogance. I've had 11 jobs in my life. I've been fired from 8 of them. I quit 3. I quit the first one. I quit the one in the middle, and then I quit Channel 8 at the end. I was fired from all the others. I've had 11 main jobs in my life. I've interviewed for 12, and I was offered all 12. I turned one of them down. I turned down Los Angeles because I just didn't want to go. Now, I've been turned down. Let me clarify this. I've been turned down over 130 some times for jobs that I've applied for. Mm-hmm. But I only had 12 interviews face to face.
Yeah.
If you saw my resume tape and you read my resume, most people passed on me. Kansas City, Lincoln, Nebraska, Las Vegas, Des Moines, Iowa. When I was coming out of Omaha, they all passed. They not interested. I finally got an interview in Dallas, and I got hired.
Yeah, good job.
When I went to that interview with Marty Haig, I go home that night. My wife says, how'd it go? And I said, nah, we're staying. Everything's good. She goes, they offer you the job? I said, no, but they will. And my own wife looked at me. She goes, God, you're the cockiest. I said, no, baby. I said, I just know how to interview. The one absolute skill that I have beyond question, and I don't know how or why I developed that, but I know I have it. I absolutely know I have it. Face to face, you will offer me the job.
Right.
Read my history, read my resume, look at my audition tape. It may or may not be interesting. But if I get across the table from you, you will offer me the job.
Done deal.
And I've interviewed face to face for 12 jobs in my life. And I've had 11, and I turned the other one down.
Yeah.
And even when I was in the Navy, you're going into boot camp, and they said, "What would you like to do?" I said, "I'd like to be a radioman." I don't know why. I just thought that seemed like, well, you got to list 3. I said, "Okay, I'll take radioman, radioman, and radioman." It was, no, you got to list 3 different jobs. I said, "I don't care about the other 2 jobs. I either become a radioman, or you can just put me as a cook for all I care. I want radioman, radioman, radioman." The guy just kind of laughed, and about 2 weeks later, they called me and said, "You're going to radio school." I mean, well, I've always been able to get the job if I get face to face, but then I also get fired. I got fired a lot too.
Well, I'll tell you what I tell my kids when they think I'm getting full of myself. It's not bragging if it's true. You know what I mean?
But I thought about this a lot. I mean, I really have, because it is kind of the one constant criticism that I get is that I am this arrogant ego. But like when I was doing the commentaries, one guy said to me one day, I'll never forget it. We're drinking wine out at the old golf course I used to play at. And this guy looks across, we all, a bunch of guys around the table, and he goes, Hansen, you're not always right about everything you say, but you sure as hell think you are. And I said, well, of course I do. I said, I wouldn't say it if I didn't think it was right. I said, well, I don't even understand that. I don't even understand. I said, is that supposed to like diss me somehow? Is that supposed to be a criticism of me? Of course I believe I'm right. I wouldn't say it if I didn't think I was right. Now show me that I'm wrong, and I will indeed change. It takes a little bit to convince me, but I'm saying, show me that I'm wrong, and I'm willing to change. But I thought that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. Yeah. And all of a sudden, all these other guys, they kind of start laughing because I think it made perfect sense. I don't think I'm always right necessarily, I mean, by the hard fact of the statement, but I absolutely believe I am.
Right.
Otherwise, I wouldn't say it. I don't understand why he thought that was somehow going to make me feel bad about myself. I said, no, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And yet I really do think that has been interpreted as arrogance or egotism, out of control, narcissism, whatever. But I mean, it's like you asked earlier one time about getting nervous and the like. I did a high school play my senior year, and I really got into the play just because of Frank Weiland, that English teacher I keep talking about all the time.
What was the play? Do you remember?
I don't remember the play, but I was an escapee from an insane asylum, so it was typecast.
Typecast.
Yeah. I mean, okay. That I do remember. But picture this if you can. So, and I did think, well, this would probably help to be on a stage. And, my buddies would get up in English class and they're reading those reports I tell about. They're up there, boy, their hands are shaking. And hell, I'm up there like, go. Frank Weiland at the end of the class, another great thing he did for me, at the end of the class, he'd have a couple of minutes. He'd go, okay, Dale, go. And as I'm walking to the front of the class, he'd give me the topic. And he'd say, okay, Dale, Vietnam, should we stay or should we go? Go, you got 3 minutes. Dale, Johnny Carson's monologue, because I know you stayed up last night to watch it. Go. Dale, civil rights, Lester Maddox, right or wrong? Go. And he would do this once or twice a week, where I would just walk up to the class, and as I'm walking up, he gives me the topic. And I just loved it. I'm sure I bombed like crazy, but I just loved it. So he convinces me to take part in the senior class play, which was unheard of for the jocks back in the day, right? Who's in theater and drama, whatever. But I was this escapee from the insane asylum. And we got a nice full house at this little small gymnasium. And we had a cardboard framing of the house, And Keith Adams, one of my best friends, was the lead, along with a woman named Carolyn Cladfelder, who was much more attractive than the name might imply. And they were the two leads. Well, I was an escapee from the insane asylum, and I had to crawl through this window. And it was on a rainy night. And I've got on a long, trench coat and galoshes, the buckle-up kind of galoshes you wear. Yeah. And Keith gives the cue for me to break into the house. And as I come through the window, my boot sticks. And I can't shake my boot free. And Keith repeats the line. And I can't get it. And I holler out keep going, you're doing fine. And Carolyn is melting down on stage. Keith is kind of in a little bit of shock. And all of a sudden, I just jerk my foot, and it turns into a Charlie Chaplin movie. And the thing just crashes. The whole cardboard set just comes crashing down, and I just step out of the window, basically. And I walk, and the audience is like going nuts. Half the audience is howling with laughter, and the other half of the audience, including my mom, is in total shock.
Yes.
And I then walked up. Carolyn's looking at me like she's about ready to cry. Keith is laughing because he and I were like Jack Benny and George Gobel. Whatever he said made me laugh. Whatever I said made him laugh all the way through school. I look at him. I wait. Perfect. And I said, I'm telling you right now, these prefab homes are not worth the money. They do not last. Do not buy a prefab home. Now everybody just screaming, laughing. We finished the play. Frank Wyden walks up to me. Again, another one of those moments in my life I'll never forget. He said, I have never in my 30 years of teaching or whatever, I've had a kid ruin my play and save it on the same night. And I get home and my mom and dad are like, what the hell? And my dad was just kind of like, I don't care, you know. And my mom was like, well, how could you go on? And I did. I learned, right? Nobody dies. You know, I did this on the banquet circuit for years. Like, people always ask me, when you get nervous, whatever. My first night on television, I was supposed to come in on a Friday and practice all day because I'd never been on television. I was radio, but I'd never been on TV in my life. Jim Kelter called in sick. I said, yeah, I can do it. Never done it in my life. Walk on the set. Jeff Jordan, the anchor, looks at me and said, I don't want you to get nervous, but there's like 250,000 people watching you right now. And I looked at him and I went, why would I be nervous? I've got this job. 250,000 people don't. And he's, oh, you're like the cockiest guy in the world. So we're back in the newsroom and Jeff Jordan's telling everybody, like, my God, this guy, nothing. You know, I said, oh, listen, let me explain something to you. When you go to a dentist and they stick a drill in your mouth with the potential, if they slip, to just jab you right through the jaw, are they nervous? God, I hope not. When you go to a doctor and he cracks open your chest and he starts working on your heart, is he nervous? I would hope not. And they're dealing with what could be life-threatening situations. I'm up here talking ball scores and highlights. Why the hell would I be nervous? I stand up in front of a crowd of people. Nobody dies. I might die on stage just because I wasn't very good that night.
Yeah.
But nobody dies. What's there to be nervous about? The closest thing I ever got to being nervous, other than like reading that newspaper for that school. But Pat Summerall and John Madden walked in one time when Brad and I were doing a Cowboys preseason game. And Madden and Summerall, and we do about a quarter with them standing behind me. Oh, okay. Now I got a little butterfly working here. I mean, because I'm sitting there thinking, although they're not, but I'm thinking everything I say, John Madden's going to go, what kind of nonsense is that? You know, and I'll have that feeling of, I'm not totally comfortable when I'm with superiors, if you will, but by the time I got around to winning that national award and I'm giving this speech in D.C. on a stage with all my bubblegum cards of news heroes have come to life, my sister's in the audience crying her eyes out. My best friends are in the audience. They're like, oh, my God, you know, and I'm just cooking. Because it just never occurred to me that I should be nervous about it. I was just honored and flattered to be there. And killed that night, by the way.
I can't imagine you ever bombing. But were you taking notes, Lila, on this nervous thing?
No, I don't need notes.
Okay, I don't want you to be nervous next week when we do the podcast. There's no excuse.
I'm not cocky.
You cannot be nervous in front of our new spokesman.
I'm not really nervous.
Okay.
I'm
the nervous one. Well, do you have time, Dale? Because there's so much more I want to get to. I want to get into SMU scandal because I'm a graduate of SMU. You can see right there. I also want to get into a little bit about Jerry
your commentaries.
Jones.
I want to get into your commentaries because we all know, if anyone knows me, we know I'm a liberal.
Yeah.
And
you're the one. I knew there was one out there somewhere.
And I really just admire your commentaries and what you verbally and emotionally brought to the table. And so I want to talk about those.
Yeah, and then I think maybe we can convey to you the impact you might have made to ordinary individuals like us.
This will shock you, but I've got a story or two along those lines.
Well, let's hold on to that, and we'll get right back because our sponsors are going to be on our ass if we don't mention
Northwest Insurance Agency.
Northwest Insurance. We'll be right back. We'll be on the policy covering everything Dallas with Mark and Lila.
Running a business is unpredictable, but with the right insurance, you can face the unexpected with confidence. At Northwest Insurance Agency, we protect what matters most: your people, your property, and your future. Whether it's liability, property, or workers' comp, we tailor coverage to fit your business needs. Because when you're covered, you can focus on what really matters: growing your business. Call us today for a free quote at 1-855-887-5656 or visit us at nwagencies.com. Northwest Insurance Agency, protection that works as hard as you do.
Okay, we are back on Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas with Mark and Lila. We've been talking to Dallas legend Dale Hansen. Dale, when we left, we were talking about how you were at Channel 8 and you ended up there. I want to talk about, real quick, I want to talk about you and your affinity for high school sports, because you were doing that at Channel 8 when no one else was doing that. What was that about?
Well, this is all because of a guy I used to work with in Omaha, Nebraska named Danny Livingston. When I was offered this job to come to Dallas, I said to Danny, I said, how do I possibly go to Dallas and compete with Vern Lundquist? I mean, this is a major league city. And he goes, well, the first thing you do, you go down there and you do high school sports, like we did in Omaha, a lot, obviously. And I said, high school sports in Dallas? He said, Dale, where do all the best college players come from? High school. People love their colleges. So, number one, you stick a camera on a kid, the kid's going to watch. His parents are going to watch, and his grandparents are going to watch. But also the colleges are going to watch. The college fans are going to watch if you can make those connections that, hey, this kid's going to end up at SMU, TCU, Texas, whatever. And so I pitched this. Picture this, though. I pitched this to the news director at the time, was named Bob Henry. And I pitched the idea to him. He goes, well, no, we're a major league city. We don't cover high school. There was no television coverage. The morning news covered the heck out of it, but there was no television coverage of high school football when I came to Texas in 1980. So I pitched this to Bob Henry thinking, I think this will be good. And he goes, well, I don't know. I said, well, let's try this. Let's just do like 4 games Friday night. We'll see how it goes. We did the 4 games. The phones went bonkers. I mean, everybody's calling. So Bob Henry comes into my office, and this is how out of the loop they were. He said, great, next week I want you to cover all the games. And I said, well, that'd be like 100. He goes, well, let's just give all the scores then. I go, well, still that would be 100. He goes, well, all right, let's just cover the Dallas schools. And I said, well, number one, that'd be like 10. But number 2, you really don't want to cover Highland Park, Plano, Arlington, DeSoto, Duncanville. Oh, okay. He said, well, wait, so what are you going to do? I said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to announce next week, send me a postcard, 25 words or less, as to why I should cover your high school game. And then we'll cover like 4 games a week. And then we'll do a story like on Tuesday of another game. But that's about all we really need to do. And that's quite honestly, that's about all we can do. And he goes, well, all right, if you think that'll work. The very next week, they start bringing in boxes of postcards. We got like 3 brothers. They're triplets, and they all play on the same team. Hey, we haven't lost to this team in like 40 years. You ought to cover us, And the flip side, hey, we've never beaten this team in 40 years, but we think this is the week. You ought to cover us. We even covered teams. They hadn't won a game in like 3 years. Come cover us. Nobody pays attention to us. We'd cover like a North Dallas team. They were like 0-8 for the 40 years running. And it just became a bonanza.
Yeah,
it just took off.
This is why I keep using the word legend, because the impact that has had. You have to be aware the domino effect, the recruiting. The tapes out there.
Exactly.
I mean that is not, and no one was doing it.
I also feel like I'm almost partly to blame for this nonsense of what happened on signing day. Because now we're covering these kids. We're making a TV event out of it. People forget this, but it wasn't in 1980.
No.
Next thing you know, now we got kids renting out a ballroom. We had one kid was in a hot tub.
Breaking contracts.
Yeah, I mean, it became this media event, which I think is horrific on the one hand. And I feel a certain amount of blame for that because basically we started it. But then the colleges got involved. Well, where's all the best high school kids? And we were in Philadelphia, another side story, but we're in Philadelphia one night, I think in 1981. And we're late in the hospitality suite. And Tex Schramm, the general manager of the Cowboys, turns on the TV news. Well, Philadelphia was playing, I think it was Kansas City in the World Series. So the Cowboys are playing the Eagles the next day, and the Cowboys are like 7-1. The Eagles are like 8-0. Big game. But there's no mention of it on the 10 o'clock Saturday night news because they're covering the World Series.
Right.
And Vern Lundquist is there. Pat Summerall was there. Tex Schramm, me. I'm over in the corner. Tex, who was just this dyed in the wool, everything should be Cowboys, 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 starts screaming, how stupid are these people in Philadelphia, these dumb reporters? They don't even mention that the Cowboys are in town to play the Eagles. What a stupid, stupid broadcast that is. And Vern is sitting over in the other corner and he goes, hey, next thing you know, they might be covering high school football. And Tex Schramm turns around and says, well, at least they're not that stupid. And I said, well, I believe that's my cue to leave.
Yeah.
And I left. But I then became great friends with Tim Edwards from LD Bell, the kids from Haltom who had never won in like 30 years. They win big. I get invited to their reunion, like their 40-year reunion. They invite me to come to it. LD Bell celebrated 40 years of their, they finished second in the state in 1982. They invite me to speak at the halftime where they were honoring the legends from that great football team. It lasted a lifetime. Yeah. It just lasted a lifetime. And my whole fascination with kids, which I legitimately did have, but it was spurred by Danny Livingston saying, you have to be opposite and different than Vern Lundquist, which again, as I keep repeating, but it was the biggest compliment I could pay him because I knew how good he was doing what he did. But I also did know that I'm going to start picking them off one at a time. Yeah. Because you stick it. It's like when we start doing cutaway, what we call cutaways at the crowd shots. Here's another thing. People forget, nobody used cutaways. You got the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, one of the most iconic organizations in all of sports. But they never showed up on the local newscast until I showed up. Now, I have to admit, I overdid it. I mean, but it drives me nuts.
Another breach of contract issue, huh?
Yeah, exactly. A guy would score a touchdown. And if you watch the other stations in town, the guy runs into the end zone. Shoot, now they're running the other team's running basketball players. They score basketball. I have trouble watching it today when they don't use cutaways. Yeah. Plus, I think cutaways, and again, cutaways are those little 2-second shots between plays for those who don't know. But so I started off and I said, because Wendell Barnhouse wrote an article just ripping me for being this male chauvinist pig. And I said, what is it that sports fans like? They like football. Most of the sports fans at that time were certainly male. And along with football, they like pretty young women. And I said, you come to my sportscast, I'll give you both. Yeah. I'll give you the football. And I'll show you the Cowboys cheerleaders. Then we realized, wait a minute. Okay, we're overdoing it with the cheerleaders. Now let's go find that crazy fan who's screaming or crying. Whatever. Well, now, hey, can I get a clip of that? No, I can't send you a clip of it. But now we're in the crowd. People are screaming at us to come take a shot of them. Right. So now the whole crowd knows I'm there. The whole crowd is screaming at me, not because it's me. It's because I'm their opportunity to get on television. Right. And then, as I said back then, I'm going to bring him into the tent. And I'm going to bring him into the tent one at a time by taking a picture of him at a game, whatever. Then it's up to me to convince them to come back.
The foresight.
I think for the most part, I was able to do that. But it was all part of doing something different, but at the same time, doing something that I really did enjoy. And it is amazing. I'll be sitting at a poker table. Some guy like, Dale, you don't remember me, but you interviewed me on my high school football team in 1984. Yeah. And now I'm looking at a guy that's bald and got a goatee and he weighs about 320. And I'm like, yeah, you're exactly the running back I remember from 1983. But they followed me around for all my life.
I mean,
What about the McDonald's athlete of the week? That because that started in what, 1988, I think.
89.
In 89, and just think of I like numbers, and so do you know like the amount of money that was donated to schools thanks to your efforts?
Well, no, I don't know exactly, but it was a pretty good chunk of money. Was it the Barack Agency brought that idea to me, and I loved it right off the bat. It's one of my favorite bits that we ever did. And Jesse Armstead, the great linebacker from Dallas Carter, was my first scholar athlete.
Oh, really?
My very first one.
Awesome.
And my dentist in Waxahachie, his daughter was on there. I run into kids kids, now they're 40, 50 years old. But I run into people all the time that were one of my scholar athletes.
It was an iconic part of every Sunday night.
I loved it. And I just love playing with those kids, but I love just the kids. It was so funny though. When I started in '89, almost every one of them, they're shaking. And I had a certain ability to kind of put them at ease, and I'm joking around with them. And we've got tape. So if they blow a line or I blow a line, whatever, one kid would give a really bad answer and then I'd blow the out cue just on purpose.
Right.
And, and some people knew it and whatever, but it was just fun. But what was so funny about watching the evolution of that, in '89 through about 2000, kids were just scared to death. I mean, almost everyone, oh my God. And then next thing you know, like, yeah, Dale, good to see you. All right, fire away, whatever you want to ask me. These kids are so internet savvy and so social media savvy. Then they just come in. But I had so much fun with them. I could do stories about that forever. But I had a young gal on. She was a champion swimmer, and she swam like 5 hours a day. And this was the whitest, blondest girl I've ever seen in my life. And she said, "Yeah, I get up in the morning like 4:00, and then I swim from like 5 to 7, and then I go to school, and then I swim like from 6 to 9, like every day, almost like every day. And she's going to go on to the Olympics or whatever." And I'm like, "Well, that explains why you are so incredibly clean." Because I mean, she was just the whitest, like she's peroxided out, whatever. Her dad comes running up and grabs her by the hand and jerks her out. Boy, he was mad.
I didn't like that one. Huh?
And I guess it might have been over.
You win some, you lose some. I mean, you know what? Some people can't take a joke. Listen, Ro, I want to get quickly before we give you some names to just riff on. Tell me a little bit, and this one affects me deeply. It hurt me, Dale, because you left me for years in conferences like the WAC and the FCC. I had to deal with all that stuff for years and years and years. You were, if not the reason, one of the main cogs in the whole SMU scandal. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Who approached you with that story? How'd you get so involved? And then, if you don't mind, mention this story went all the way up to the governor's mansion.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit. Did anybody try to stop you from pursuing it? Go ahead.
It was another perfect example of what I mentioned earlier in this podcast about the tinfoil hatted woman that I had in Newton, Iowa, that fed me all these great stories. This was like most good stories come from an unhappy source. Somebody's upset about their job, so they'll rat out the boss, whatever. I just get a call one day from a secretary at SMU who worked in the athletic department. And as Bob Hitch, the athletic director at that time, said, "Well, she's just a disgruntled employee." I said, "Well, probably. Because, your best stories don't come from the president of the Chamber of Commerce. You're trying to track down a guy who robbed the liquor store. Your best source is probably not the guy in the mayor's office.
Yeah.
You got to deal with some bad people to get to the story of it. Or at the very least, some people who are unhappy." And this woman was. And she says to me, she goes, I don't know if anybody will do this story except you and Channel 8. So we did. And that story changed me completely as a sportscaster. It changed everything about the way I look at sports. Because as I've also said many times, and I think I said here, I used to be just kind of a cheerleader that was, having fun and just laughing my way through the sportscast. That, they won a game, they lost a game, whatever. That changed pretty much everything the way I look at sports, and it led to the commentaries later in life. It changed the way I look at every game that I do watch, whether I was working the game or just a fan. I'm still a fan of sports, but I'm nothing close to what I used to be because of SMU.
Just because you're so jaded now, or what? Why do you say that?
It just tore the scab off that quite honestly, I probably knew was always there. The sore, the boil, of the underbelly of what was being done in college sports.
Just the money that rules everything.
It just, as you mentioned, it went all the way to the governor.
Yeah.
The governor of the state of Texas says it was okay to lie about the cheating because he didn't have his hand on a Bible. The governor of the state of Texas says it's okay to lie about cheating at Southern Methodist University, which was also happening at Texas Christian University and happened at almost every school in America, quite honestly. But what's also funny about that, not funny, I guess, but it was about maybe a year ago. So this was 1986 when we did the story. 87, they got the death penalty because, as they said in that documentary they did on ESPN, 30 for 30, they said, were you surprised that SMU got the death penalty? And I said, well, you have to understand, in Texas, we will kill you. We will kill you.
Real quick, I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to, again, emphasize the legend status here because the domino effect that story had, it brought a whole conference down. Yeah. It changed the landscape of college football.
It changed.
Please go ahead.
It changed me, but it certainly changed college football. Right. Like you say, SMU now playing in the WAC, and they're playing Cincinnati.
Right.
Schools I never heard of.
Thank you, by the way.
The Southwest Conference breaks up. And it was. At the very least, we were the one tugging on the thread.
Right.
But as I've said also 1,000 times, I hated that story, and I really hated the fact that story had to be told. And I'm incredibly proud of the fact that we were the ones who told it.
Yeah.
We worked a long time to make sure we had that story right. There were a lot of people at WFAA who had connections to SMU, graduates of SMU. So we thought there's going to be roadblocks coming every which way. Well, they hired a law firm. This was the greatness of WFAA. They hired a law firm from D.C. to vet the story because they wanted to remove themselves from just that interference.
Right.
That if it passes muster with the lawyers, we'll go. Which was, I really enjoyed working with them, except for the fact that, we'll call him again. I said, I've already talked to him 3 times. Well, let's make it 4, just to be safe. How about changing this word here? I'm like, that word doesn't, I mean, it was, oh my God. When they talk about vetting, they're getting paid by the word, apparently. I mean,
they want.
But the night that we break the story, they had a big, meeting over in the corporate headquarters. And we're all standing in the newsroom. And it's like, if they kill this story now, then we all walk. And I'm thinking, man, I don't want to do that. I mean, I got a house, I got kids, I got a mortgage. But we didn't have to.
Yeah.
They come back in, and Channel 8 just wanted the management wanted to just hear it again, vetted as to, how we had the story. And then I did a radio interview after that, and David Stanley was our main source.
Right.
The secretary led us to David Stanley. David Stanley gave us the materials that we needed, the former linebacker for SMU. But David Stanley was a druggie. He was really a bad kid. And I said that in a radio interview. And I said, but that's not my concern. My concern is he telling the truth? And then I gave that line about the Chamber of Commerce or the mayor's office. I know I'm going to have to get down into the mud to get to the bottom of that story. My only concern is, are those people in the mud with me now? Are they telling the truth? And I said, but David Stanley is just a bum and a druggie. And Marty Haig just went nuts. And he called me in. He's screaming at me. He said, you just said that our main source is a bum and a druggie. And I said, he is. I said, Marty, we can't hide from that. We can't. Now, I did have a source that I've never identified and I never will. He's my deep throat.
Your deep throat.
My deep throat that I will take to the grave. But now, if I'd have dropped his name out there, whoa, now things get a little different.
Wow.
But what he did for me was I would call him when I would get another angle to the story. We'd meet for a beer or something, and he would just, yeah. And then the last day I called him. I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And he goes, well, I said, boy, I just don't know about that. I still have questions. I said, you still have questions? And I said, I'll tell you what, if I'm wrong about this, I'm going to count to 10 and you hang up. If I'm wrong about anything I've just said to you, you hang up. And I'm in my house in Keller and I'm counting backwards from 10. And I got to 0. And I said, are you still there? And he goes, yeah, I'm still here. I said, I appreciate it. Bye. And that was the ultimate. And it was kind of fun, but I have to admit, it was kind of fun. But here was great. I mentioned about a year ago, I'm over at Javier's, another cigar bar, which I tend to be at. Man, I got to stop doing this. And
role model.
Ira Terrell. It might have been longer than a year, but Ira Terrell was being honored, the former SMU basketball player. Yeah. And I've known Ira for 30 years, whatever. And Ira calls me over to his table, and he's got like all these 10 big SMU guys. I said, man, I said, have you guys been frisked? You know, making a joke about it. Everybody's laughing. Yeah. And I'm shaking hands with everybody. And all of a sudden, I turn around, this young, I say young, he's probably 40, maybe, if that. Nice suit. And I reach out to shake hands, and he slaps my hand. He said, I'm not shaking hands with you, you piece of ass. I said, you know, after what you did to my school, I would never shake your hand. And Ira starts to get up. I said, no, sit down. I turned back, and the general manager at Javier's has got the guy by the collar. And he says, kid, I don't know who you are, but I need the big man in my bar more than I need you. And I said, no. I said, he's fine. We're fine. But he just wouldn't let it go. And I said, and I've run into several of those people. And I was like, number one, that was what, 40 years ago, right? Am I right? I've lost a decade.
It's been quite a while, but you said you hated that show. As an SMU alumni, I can guarantee you I hated that story more than you did.
One of the star players who wasn't a source of mine and was still just kind of playing along, his dad was a judge. And he told me the story later because they didn't really know, or at least they claimed not to really know if this story was going to be true or not. And the guy's dad, who was a judge, turned over and looked at him at the end of the story, and he goes, I make my living reading witnesses. You're leaving SMU. He said, you're done.
Wow.
And as it turned out, it was. It was. I get it that everybody was doing it, but since when is that an excuse? I said this back then. You know, I tried to tell my dad that when he caught me with a beer, my senior year in high school. I drank 4 beers. He threw me out of the house. And I told him, I said, well, all my buddies drink beer. All I got was my ass beat for it. Yeah, I mean, when does everybody does it pass as an excuse? And SMU people at Southern Methodist University tried to tell me for the longest time, well, you know, everybody's doing it. I said, well, I didn't make up the rules, as you see now, obviously, which I think is ridiculous what they're doing now. But I said, if you want to pay kids to play, that's not my job. My job is to point out the fact that you're not playing by the rules.
Right.
Now, if you don't like the rules, change them. I don't have any ability to change the rules. I'm just reporting the facts of what you're doing. And I've been given speeding tickets, and I've tried to tell the officer I'm not the only one doing 83. Didn't work. Well. Didn't work. And yet, so many SMU people, they still fall back. Well, you know. We weren't the only ones. I said, nobody ever said you were the only ones. In fact, I'm the one that said TCU was doing it. Yeah. Texas was doing it. But here's a quick one for you. There was a kid named Edwin Simmons, was a running back at Texas.
Right.
And we found out about the car he was driving. I called a reporter in Austin. I said, I need a picture of Edwin Simmons driving that car. Next thing I know, the car's gone. Oh. And the reporter called Texas and said, hey, Hansen's onto the story. And they made Edwin Simmons get rid of his car.
Wow.
And about 6 months later, that same kid called me for a job. And I'm like, really? Are you not paying attention to what we do here? You think I'm going to hire you?
Yeah.
You know? But it did. It changed. Which again, I'm very happy about. I'm
Amen.
very proud of the fact that
Yes.
if people are old enough to remember being 1981, and then they'll see the metamorphosis that I went through in 86, 87, which I think eventually led to 2010, 2014, 2020 with the commentaries. And it's exactly who I wanted to be. And I never shied away from the hate mail that the SMU story brought me. And I never shied away from the hate mail that came with the commentaries.
Wow.
Quite honestly, I kind of relished in it.
As I mentioned several times, the impact you've had on the landscape of the sports world is incredible. And we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I want to get into your broadcasting career with a very famous football team, and then we're going to do our 5 quick questions. And then let you get out of here, Dale. You've been listening to Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas with Mark and Lila, and we will be back with Dallas legend Dale Hansen.
Brought to you by Northwest Insurance Agency.
Thank you, Lila. Raise for you, girl. We'll be right back.
In the heart of Dallas, we know that life moves fast. And when it does, you need an insurance company that's as reliable as the city we call home. At Northwest Insurance Agency, we're proud to be a part of the Dallas community, offering customized coverage to protect your home, your car, and your family. Whether you're navigating downtown or enjoying a weekend in the suburbs, we've got you covered every step of the way. We're more than just an insurance company. We're your Dallas neighbor, always here to help. Northwest Insurance, proudly serving Dallas.
Okay, we are back on Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas with Mark and Lila, and we've been talking to Dallas great Dale Hansen. Dale, when we left, we were talking about the SMU story, and I think I've quit crying now so we can move on. I want to talk about your years commenting on this very, very famous football team that people outside of the DFW area probably know you for. So let's talk about your time with the Newton Nighthawks.
How the heck do you know that?
Chat GPT and Google are amazing things.
But in all seriousness, that was about, once again, I got invited back to their 40th year reunion as well. Awesome. From the time I covered them. But the Newton Nighthawks was a semi-pro football team in Newton, Iowa that played out of the Chicagoland Football League. So every weekend we'd either have a home game in Newton, and a team from Chicago would drive down, or we would go to Chicago. But I did I got a million stories about them too, but I won't bore you with all of them. But the one story that still just reminds me of how lucky I've been in my life. I did the championship game, but the field that they were playing on didn't have a press box of any kind. So we were in the school gymnasium across the street, and we opened up the window, and we're 200 yards or something. I mean, I couldn't hardly see the players. And Tom Ross, a former coach of the Nighthawks, was my color guy. And we're doing the broadcast. And I've been doing this now for a couple of years. That's it. I mean, I don't know anything about anything. And there was, in that championship game, the Newton Nighthawks are losing. And again, keeping in mind, I'm sitting in a gymnasium across the street. And a kid named Jerry Moses, who played for the Iowa Hawkeyes, was on the team, and he was an unbelievable player. And they kicked to him, and he's going to return it for the game-winning touchdown in the final minutes of the game. And all I could do, I was so excited, because, again, I was a cheerleader, basically. All I could do was, he may go, he may go, he may go, he's down. When I got back to Newton, a good friend of mine was telling me, said, we loved your broadcast, it was great, but you might want to give the occasional yard line. I said, well, I'm kind of new at this. But yeah, that was Stan Allspaw was the quarterback on that team. And he and I were just great buddies. And we would sit out in the old country roads outside of Newton, Iowa, drinking beer in the middle of the night, listening to a guy in Des Moines who actually called the Queen of England at like 1 o'clock in the morning, Dallas or Iowa time. And he gets somebody from the palace on the phone, and he wants to speak to the queen. And again, alcohol probably had a part in that. Just a little bit. We would just sit there and howl at this guy. I mean, he was just the funniest guy ever. And he'd make these crank calls and stuff. And Stan and I would just sit out there and drink beer and tell stories. And he was the high school football coach in Baxter. And I did all those high school games. And this John Carl, the guy who hired me at Newton, he said, when I got the Cowboys job, he said, and he heard about it. I don't know how he did, but he was right. They offered me $750 to do a game. And I thought it was for 3 games. I thought it was for all 3. It turned out it was $750 a game, which I was never heard of such a thing. And I looked at him and I said, well, I used to do Prairie City Colfax sitting on top of a press box in the rain for $10. And I covered the Newton Nighthawks for $10. So I think $750 sounds about right.
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, who would have thought that would have led to you doing the color for America's team?
There again, it was just a dream to it was just the stupidest thing ever.
Angel was crazy. I mean, that thing must be weigh 100 pounds sitting on your neck.
It is. I mean, I really did. I did a game, Prairie City Colfax, and a former high school football player who was a couple of years out of high school, a guy named Mick Trier, was trying to get into broadcasting. It was raining. We're outside. And he's holding up an umbrella, and we tape recorded the games, and we played them on Saturday so the kids could actually hear it. And I'm recording this high school football game in the rain with Mick Trier holding an umbrella. And not only did I get $10 a game, I got 10 cents a mile. So I put in 11 miles. So I put in $1 and a dime for the mileage. And John Carl, bless his heart, kicked it back. He said, I've been to Colfax. It's 10 miles.
Oh my God.
And he gave me $1.
Oh. Did you tell that story to Brad Sham anytime he started bitching about something? He's like, listen here, buddy.
When Brad and I started, Gary Brandt was the general manager of the radio station. And Gary Brandt came to me. I don't even think Brad knows this story. But another true one. Vern, the press box for RFK Stadium was the worst thing you've ever seen in your life. I mean, it was a disaster. The toilets were constantly plugged up, not working. You're jammed into this little. It was horrific. It kind of reminded me of my Newton days. And Brad and Vern would always make jokes about it and complain about it. So Gary Brandt says to me, "Can you lighten the mood on that?" He said, "That's kind of run its course." And I promise you, we were there the first day. Brad starts in about, can you imagine where we're working now with this? Yeah. And I said, Brad, I did a game on top of a press box in Colfax, Iowa, in the rain. This is a luxurious palace to me. And Brad just started laughing. And that's in part how I think Brad and I worked together as well as I think we did for the longest time. Is that without question, Brad taught me a little bit more about how to work. And I think I taught Brad a little bit more of it's just a game.
It was so obvious. Y'all really were the Summerall Madden of the Dallas, of the NFL locally.
We got to a point where we could do it back to back. He finished my sentences. I finished his.
I know you were famously friends with Aikman during his playing Dales. I don't know if you still are now, but can you tell me, as a Dallas Cowboy fan, give me some stories about some obscure Cowboys that maybe aren't household names? Anybody that you remember sticks out in your mind?
Kevin Gogan was like this 6'8", 350-pound right guard that they had. We're in London, England, with the Cowboys when they're playing a preseason game over there, and the reporter kept saying to him, "Is everybody in your family a giant? Is everybody a giant?" And Kevin hollers at me with all these London reporters around him. He goes, "Hey, Hansen, they want to know if my whole family is a giant like me. Tell them about my son. He lives in the zoo in Seattle." And Mark Tuanay was a guy. I love Mark Tuanay. I used to play cards with Mark Tuanay. It broke me in half, and it kind of shocked me that he had as big a drug problem. I knew he smoked a little marijuana, did a little coke. I'm sure I didn't know. I honestly didn't know he did the heroin and everything that eventually led to his death. But we went to play blackjack one night in a hotel room, and it was during the OTAs that just ended. So we're all out partying the end of OTAs for the off-season training for the Cowboys. And somehow Dale Hellestray and Mark Tuanay and I end up in a hotel room at the Marriott, drinking beer and playing blackjack with the three of us. And I won a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where I knew we were just playing Monopoly money because now, and he was trying to catch up. And if you ever play blackjack, but you're not going to catch up.
Yeah.
And I mean, now it's stacked. And I'll just tell the numbers because it's a joke. And he's dead, so I guess the statute limited.
Yeah.
Anyway, he owes me like $85,000.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And he looks at me. Well, Tuanay is the toughest, sweet bear to a guy like me, but he was an incredibly tough dude. And I'll tell one other story about him if I may, but to finish this one. So he just can't, he doubled down. Now he owes me 120, and then he went back and he hit there. Could never catch up. So if I say, I'm done. He goes, Joe, I got $15,000 in my car. Will you take the $15,000? I went,
Sure.
yeah, sure. So he goes out to his car. Dale Hansen looked at me and goes, that's awfully generous of you. I mean, he owes you like $85. I said, if he doesn't even want to pay me, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, what am I going to say? Yeah, I'll beat you up if you don't. And I say that. So and then he told Rich Dalrymple, the PR director, he said, Hansen's like the greatest guy in the world. He said, what'd you do? And I said, I didn't. And he thought because I let him off the hook, supposedly, and I knew we were just playing Monopoly money after we got past 10,000 or something. But he gave me $15,000. And then thought I was a good guy.
Yeah.
I thought, no, because he could have just said, I'm not paying. And because here's the story with doing it. I did a story with all the Cowboys players. I said, you're in an alley. 5 guys chase you down this alley, and you got one guy who can come help you get out. Who do you want? Everybody said Tuane. Everybody said
Really?
Tuane. A couple of guys said, Roger Staubach. A couple of guys said, Hollywood Henderson, maybe,
Randy White.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But out of like 30 guys, 26 of them, 25 of them said Tuane. So I'm interviewing Tuane about this. I'm interviewing Everson Walls. Do you remember Cubby Walls?
Yeah.
Sure.
Cornerback for the Cowboys.
Cowboys. And he names everybody but Mark Tuane. Hollywood Henderson, Randy White, Staubach, Too Tall Jones. I mean, everybody. Again, not horrible choices, but without question, Tuane was apparently the guy.
Yeah.
And I said to Cubby, I said, wait a minute, what about Tuane? And he goes, oh, wait a minute, you said 5 guys, right? I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, no, hell no. He said, Tuane would come in the alley, kill those 5 guys. Then he'd kill me because he forgot I'm the reason he's in the alley.
Wow.
So I go to Tuane, and I tell him what Everson Walls had said. And he just got, I said, so you could handle 5 guys to help your buddy? And he goes, human? I said, yeah. He goes, yeah. I said, so nobody scares you? I mean, nobody scares you? And again, with this, believe it or not, angelic look on his face, he goes, human?
Wow.
Okay.
Did you ever see that side of him? Did you ever see any portion of that side of him?
No.
Okay.
No. The closest I got to it was Randy White was flirting around with Dan Hampton, the former Chicago Bear defensive end, like 6'9", 300 pounds. Dan Hampton, they're at the Pro Bowl in Hawaii, and Dan Hampton walks up to Randy White and wants to fight because Randy'd been flirting with his girlfriend or wife or whatever it was, I don't know. And Randy, of course, I'll take care of it. And Mark Tuane said, no, you got to play in the game. Let me take care of it. And Tuane, I wasn't there, but he told me the story. Randy White confirmed the story. Tuane got up, stomped on his ankle, broke it, and then threw him through a plate glass window.
Wow.
And the story came out that Dan Hampton won't play in the Pro Bowl because he broke his ankle in practice. No, he broke it at a bar when Mark Tuane stomped on his ankle. So I go to Tui and I said, is this true? I said, you stomped on his ankle and broke it? He goes, Dale, the man's 6'9". I had to get him down to where I could hit him. I said, yeah, okay, I guess you do.
That's awesome. Real quick, I want to ask you one last question, and then Lila had a question. Tell me, because the man's still so polarizing, the ugliest Jerry Jones story you feel comfortable sharing with us.
The ugliest Jerry Jones story, I can't tell you.
That you feel comfortable telling.
This is close enough.
Okay.
I think we're all partying in Austin like we all did back in the day.
Okay.
And some people are shocked by this. I'm not. Have I ever mentioned that I was in a bar? So Jerry Jones and I and a couple other guys, I think Jim Reeves was there, Mickey Spagnola, a bunch of reporters. We're going from bar to bar to bar.
Right.
Well, now it's like 2:00 and they're closing this bar we're in. And Jerry said, let's go down to 6th Street in Austin where the bars stay open, but they don't, they can't serve, but the bars stay open. I said, well, yeah, why not? I mean, I'm kind of keyed up. I said, well, I'll go. But we walk in. Jones said, I'm going to need drinks for all my guys. And the bartender, and I've used this line myself, and I love this line. Jerry looks at the bartender and said, I'm going to need drinks for all my guys. And the bartender said, I'm very sorry, Mr. Jones, but, it's after 2:00, and we can't sell alcohol. And Jerry looks at him without missing a beat and said, buddy, You either start serving my friends drinks, or I'm going to buy the bar tomorrow, and you're the first sumbitch I get rid of. About 10 minutes later, Jones walks up to me. I'm sitting there in the corner, and he says, go to the bathroom. I said, I don't have to go to the bathroom. He said, no, go to the bathroom. I go to the bathroom, and there's a guy sitting on a stool, margaritas, gin, rum and coke, beers. And we drank till 5:30 in the morning. Jerry was on the dance floor with some gal. That's the last thing I remember. 5:30 in the morning, I saw him going to get me a cab, take me to my hotel. I sleep till like 4 o'clock the next afternoon because we all drinking all night long. Jones, last I saw him, was dancing on the dance floor at 5:30 in the morning. And he then got up at about 7 o'clock and did Good Morning America and was at practice all day long. And I come staggering in with the biggest hangover in the world at 4 o'clock to do my 5 o'clock hit for the sports. And Jones like, Dale, where you there? I got to tell you about it. I said, I don't want to hear another word. I need plausible deniability. Leave me out of the whole story. Leave me out of the whole story. But then when you get to my retirement, my last training camp with the Cowboys, and this is why I say I can't. Without question, not just Jerry, but I could tell stories about a lot of players and a lot of people in all sports that would have gotten me on ESPN years ago on a regular basis. Right. Some of them would have gotten me on CNN on a regular basis. When I was retiring, Nate Newton said, everybody loves Hansen because he knows about our drugging and our whoring, but he never reported on it. And I said, well, Nate, I appreciate the sentiment, but that's not really helping me very much. But I'm at my last Cowboys camp, and I'm walking past Jerry's little office area there, and he calls me in. He goes, I should have said this to you a long time. I told Jerry Jones in 1989, when he asked me, he said, are you going to report on my personal life? And I said, and it was shall we say, a interesting situation. And I said, well, if you trade Aikman to impress these people around you, I might have to mention that. But I said, as long as it doesn't affect your professional life, I'm not interested. Now, I will say, right or wrong, I guarantee you there's a lot of people think I'm wrong about that. That in this day and age, especially, if I know it, I need to be out front reporting it. My whole life, professionally, was, I don't really want you digging into my private life. So why should I dig into yours just because I can get clicks on a posting or whatever you call that stuff? So as I've said to many players, I'm playing cards one night and they're all passing around a joint and they hand it to me and I pass it on. And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. I said, they go, are you going to report this? I said, are you playing tomorrow? Playing Sunday? Playing Thursday? And they go, yeah, fine. Now, if you don't show up because you're still stoned in somebody's basement smoking dope, I'm probably going to have to mention it.
Might have to.
And Jerry calls me in and he goes, you always walk the walk. And I said, well, or walk the talk, I guess is the phrase, whatever it is. But I said, that's what I did. And I've had people tell me I was wrong about this. I've had people tell me, yeah, that's very nice. I'll try to skirt this as best I can to protect myself and everything. But Jim Dent wrote a book, and he had a story about Jerry that I knew was true, and it was rather horrific, I would argue. And Jim Dent says, I need you to confirm that story. I said, well, no, I can't. I won't. He said, well, my editor won't let me, or publisher won't let me write it unless I get somebody on the record. And I said, well, not going to be me. So I said, no, I'm not going to do it. Not my place. So Jim writes a book, and he's got the drug use in there and the girlfriends in there and all kinds of stuff. So we're on a plane. I think we're flying to Philadelphia, flying somewhere on the East Coast anyway. And Jerry walks back to me on the plane. He goes, Dale, you read Dent's book, right? You read it? I said, yeah, I read it. And he goes, I need something. And you know how this works. And if they can find that thread,
right,
that, that's not true.
So the whole
then
thing's
we just
true.
jerk on it
Right.
and everything else is.
Right.
He goes, Dale, I need something to discredit the book. I said, well, Jerry, I said, I read the book and I don't know all the stories, but I said, from what I do know and what I think I know, it seemed like a pretty fair description.
Yeah, you left some stuff out.
And I said, yeah. And I said, and he walks away. And I said, Jerry, I didn't give him that one story. And Jerry's only response was, I appreciate it, big man. I appreciate it.
That's awesome.
And I hate to tease you. I hate to tease the audience with it, but it was, I just can't. And, but I mean, again, not criminal or, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, but it would have been big.
The line's been crossed.
The lines had been crossed,
Yeah.
and it was wild. And I'll never forget, as he's walking away, I said, "Hey, Jerry, I didn't give him that one story." He goes, "I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it."
Well, I like that.
No,
You-
Jerry's crazy, and I kind of respect some of it. I understand a lot of it. I always say this about, and it took me a while to get there, but I've always tried to compare this to when people jump on. I said, how would anybody like a camera in their face 24/7? There's very few of us.
Right.
I know I couldn't survive it.
Right.
I mean, I don't want my life to be considered by the lowest denominator of what I did. Or now again, you cross that line and you do something criminal or whatever. But
story.
I hate it when I see, oh, look, he's coming out of the bar and he's drunk. Well,
Yeah.
I
How
know
many
a few
times
people
you've
have done
been
that.
drunk? Right. Yeah, I understand. I agree with that.
I do. I just said, I'm just not going to report it.
Right,
I'm just
right.
not going to report it.
Right.
And there's a part of me, I'll be honest with you, there's a part of me that sits there and like, about half your audience is sitting there right now going, I got to get a hold of Hansen. I got to get that.
Yeah. I was about to say, I love the tease because it lets our imagination run.
Yeah.
Two things I learned from that story. I need to start partying harder to be more successful. And Nate Newton always has inspirational words. Go ahead, lady.
So I have a question
Okay,
for you.
yeah.
I had said something earlier about I love your commentaries. I really, and even now, like if you were still doing the commentaries, I know for the person that I've grown into in the last several years, I would love them even more. And I have a big question about, tell me about some of the reactions to some of your commentaries.
Yeah, that was my favorite part of it. When I always got a lot of negative reaction, and I've always enjoyed it. But a lot of people in the newsroom, they were like scared by it or bothered by it or something. I'm like, no, I always believe this. Half the people will like it, they'll watch. Half the people will hate it, and half of that half will watch. I mean, I had so many. I'd have guys call me like, Hansen, I quit watching you 7 years ago, and all my friends quit watching you. You're such a liberal, crazy. And in fact, last night you really ticked me off. I said, well, how'd you see it? You go, I was walking through the front room, and my wife had it on for some reason. I'm on my way to the bed, and I said, let me see if I got this straight. You were just walking through the front room as I just happened to deliver the one line out of that entire newscast that really set you off. And I really believe that. I said, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, I quit watching you years ago, I said, well, you couldn't watch it. Because I'd be living on my island in the Caribbean hitting golf balls into the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
But the two that really jump out at me, the one was very simple. The Michael Sam commentary was kind of put me on the map. Surprisingly, they were all positive. One of my producers, he ran camera, actually, Billy's son's liberal guy, and he looks around, and after I did, he goes, well, what do you think the reaction to that will be? I said, well, I'll get about 100 emails, and 50 of them will love it, and 50 of them will hate it. I got home, I had like 115. Next day, I had like 500. Next afternoon, I had over 900. Ended up getting like 6,000. Unbelievable. Well, they were almost all positive. I mean, just every one of them.
Really?
Like, oh, wow. And I'm like, and I made the mistake because Pete Delkus asked me, what's the reaction to that commentary? And I said, well, it's amazing. I said, it's all been positive. And all of a sudden, the rocks parted. And here they come. They come crawling out. And the next 1,000 emails were some of the most vile, outrageous things you can imagine. But the one that stays with me, I did a commentary one year at Christmas time, of all things, on my Thank God for Kids.
Mm-hmm.
And sitting in a bar with a buddy of mine, very conservative guy. And we were arguing about the Penn State scandal with Jerry Sandusky and the little boys that he was being accused of molesting. And my buddy looks at me and goes, I don't believe a single one of those kids. Not a single one of them. I said, why? He said, nobody would keep that to themselves. He said, there's no kid that's going to not tell. Well, I know there is. So I left the bar and went back to the station and wrote the commentary. And I said, in my line I said, everybody knows somebody who's a victim of sexual abuse. You might not think you do, but I know you do because you all know me. And I was raped when I was 10 years old. And I then told my story. And my buddy called me, and he's almost in tears, like, oh, my God, I didn't know. I said, well, that's kind of why I wanted to do it. You're saying that the kids are lying and making it up because they didn't tell years ago when they were younger. I'm telling you that most victims, male and female, of sexual abuse don't tell. And I'm one of them. I got swamped with calls. And then I get an email from a guy, and this one will go to my grave. As long as I can remember anything, I will remember this one. And he said, I'm 83 years old. And he said, I too was raped when I was a boy. I never told anybody. But if you're willing to tell what happened to you, I'm going to go call my children, and I'm going to go explain to my wife why I've been the biggest asshole they've ever known in their lives, and why I've always been so angry about everything in my life. Because if you're willing to go public with what happened to you, it's time for me to go public with what happened to me.
I mean, that again, I can't.
And then after,
Go ahead, please.
Well, and then the same thing with the Michael Sam commentary. We're at a station party, season beginning party. This has been, so now it's been, I did the Michael Sam commentary in February, so it's like September of 2014. And this guy walks up to me and he said, can I give you a hug? Yeah, I guess so. And he gives me a hug and he starts crying. And he said, my dad called me last week. I'm thinking that must have been a hell of a phone call. He said, well, you don't understand. He said, I haven't talked to my dad in like 8 years. He said, I came out to my dad when I was graduating from high school, and he immediately threw me out of the house, and he's never talked to me since. But he called me last week, and he said, I just came across that commentary by Hansen about how he thinks it's okay to be gay. He said, I still don't understand it, but he said, you and I are going to figure it out. So come on back home, let's talk. And now there's two guys standing there crying. Because this young man, 25, 26, 27 years old, whatever he was, hadn't talked to his dad in like 8 years because he was gay. But his dad said, if that old fat Hansen said it's okay, then I guess we're going to figure it out. And that guy and that 83-year-old man, I guess that is the arrogant part of me or whatever, but I've always wanted, what's that line? I always kind of hoped that I left my footprints in the sand. You know, that I didn't change the world. I was never going to change the world.
But you changed the world for them.
I changed.
You
I
did
think I
for
changed
them.
the world for some, and I think that's not a bad goal.
No,
That's not a bad goal.
I
I think the fact that if you can make a difference, in somebody's life, then you've had a pretty good life. You've had a pretty good life, and that's the way I didn't live the life that I wish I would have in many ways. I don't have any real regrets. I mean, I am who I am, but I, and I have issues in my life like everybody does, I'm sure. Some worse than others, I would argue. Some better than others. But that's where that arrogance, if you will, that's where that egotism that people talk about me a lot of times is that I'm just real happy with how fortunate my life has been, despite being fired 8 times, despite having a young marriage fall apart, despite having a son and a grandson who aren't real crazy about me. I just let all of that go. I just let every part of it is life. Everybody has that. Everybody shares all of that. Some people just find an acceptance of it better than others, and I think that's what I am. That's who I am.
Well, I think I keep going back to the statement when I said it's not bragging if it's true. You've definitely lived an extraordinary life. You've had such an impact on people, and I had and honestly, this was almost like a bucket list to me to have you interview you, and you have far exceeded my expectations. So you're I don't think he understands what an inspiration is to people. Just those commentaries really have changed my life. Some of the ones that I have a gay daughter. So you being able to say it in the landscape of sports makes it that easier. Every step is a step towards making it easier.
It was funny. When the Michael Sam story broke, I didn't know what I was going to write about. And I'm driving home and I'm hearing all this outrageous stuff on the radio, talk radio. And that's when it came to me. And I had this one line in there that I really did wrestle with when I wrote it. I always wrote my commentaries. I guess it seemed to make Barry Horn, writer for the Morning News, question me. But I think about my commentaries for a long time. And I get one or two lines that I really like. And then I just sit down and I write it in 10, 15 minutes. I don't understand laboring over it for, day on day after day. I think that just tends to make it worse. But I do. But I didn't write it in 10 minutes because I thought about it for 24 hours. So I wake up in the middle of the night. I scribble down. I got a notebook and I scribble down a couple of lines. Next morning I couldn't hardly read them, whatever. But I wrote this line about the Michael Sam commentary, and I said, I'm not always comfortable when a man tells me he's gay because I don't understand his world. But I do understand that he's part of mine. And I thought, I love that line. I loved it, but I thought, that could blow back on me in a very negative way. And when I was on the Ellen Show, never mentioned that I was on the Ellen Show. So I'm on the Ellen Show, and she says to me, that was the line. And I thought, wow. She goes, no, that's the line. She goes, we don't expect you to understand. We don't even demand that you understand. But we do demand that you accept that we're here and we're part of your life. That's all we want. Right. That's all we want. And I host all these dinner parties at the house. For the black tie dinner, I'll auction off 2 or 3 dinners. I rent them a limo, we bring people down, we sit on my back patio, we talk about the issues of the world. And it's just fascinating to talk to people. And for the most part, the acceptance is there. And I just wish that we would do that in every aspect of our life. It's like, when I was telling you earlier about, hanging out with all the black guys. And they said, well, so you just love all the black guys. Not all of them, no, not all of them. That's a Kevin Costner line from the movie,
Yeah. Oh,
and remember that?
Yeah.
And in fact, it was Costner that gave me that line at the Ellen Show. And he goes, not all. But that's why I got all these, black friends. I'm like, the hell is that? What? God Almighty, turn that down. But fine, we're all different. The diversity, the inclusion, and the equity that we're trying to eliminate from our society is what has made this society great. Right. It is what has made this country great. The diversity and the equity and the inclusion that we're trying, not we, but some are trying to get rid of, is actually what makes this country great. Right. It's the same thing I said when they were talking about protesting, taking a knee during the national anthem. Again, I don't think I would go that far, but it's not my place. The greatest thing about this country is that you have the right to be an idiot and protest whatever you want. That's the greatest thing about this country. Go to Iran and protest the flag. Go to North Korea and protest the flag. Go to Saudi Arabia and question the whatever they call themselves, or the prince, or that's the greatness of this country. Mm-hmm. That we can disagree, that we don't understand, that your particular life choices or the decisions you make or the way that your clothes or the tattoos you have or whatever. My granddaughter's got 3 or 4 tattoos, drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Drives me nuts. But then she says, it's her grandmother's name on there. And it's,
okay.
But it's not for me to understand. It's just simply for me to accept that those are her choices. Those, and I think I do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah.
That while I don't understand the choices of a lot of people in a lot of different things, I do have a certain ability to accept those choices.
Right. Well,
and that's all. That's all I think anybody's entitled to, and I think that's all anybody deserves.
I think I wish more people thought like that. And in fact, I think more people do think like you. I think the powers that be have decided it's more important that we fight each other. So.
I do believe now. I'm in this. Flipping it from the 60s, I'm now in the silent majority.
Yeah.
Well,
Dale, I could stay here all day.
No, we're done. I told you. I told you, if we did this for a couple hours, you get to ask 3 or 4 questions.
We're going to talk to Lila about having you on all the time because I could go on with you all day. I mean, I'm telling you. But we do have 5 questions that we ask.
Rapid fire.
Oh,
rapid fire.
Nothing hard.
Rapid fire. All right.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna start.
Please, good.
Okay.
You understand that my brain's gone to mush over this time frame. So
that's why I'm saying rapid fire.
Okay, we'll
no
see what
pressure.
I can do. All right.
Okay, your favorite Tex-Mex restaurant in Dallas, DFW,
Easy.
and your favorite dish that you get there.
Javier's, obviously, and dish. Nothing particular. The 2 things they have a platter of what I'm not sure if they call this one of their dishes, but it's got a little bit of everything. It's got meat and the sauces and the
a little sampler
sampler table with the beef nachos.
Okay.
I like really spicy foods.
Okay.
But I don't really know all the dishes. It took me forever to figure out how you're supposed to eat a tamale, for goodness sake. I thought you just ate the whole thing. I didn't know about that.
I mean, I can show you in about 0.6 seconds. I have plenty of them in my lifetime. Okay, same thing with barbecue. Favorite place, favorite dish?
Landry's. Landry's, right? The one in Bishop Arts District.
Is it called Landry's?
Isn't it Landry's or
Lockhart's.
Lockhart.
I was going to say Landry's is seafood.
Yeah.
Yeah, Landry's.
Lockhart.
No, Landry's is, Lockhart. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And just the traditional brisket. I get it.
Yeah.
I always tell them, I said, heavy on the brisket. I like all the, the sausage and everything, but load up the brisket. There's just nothing better than good brisket with jalapenos and whatever, spicy sauce.
Yeah.
Chopped or sliced, though, on the brisket. Chopped or sliced brisket.
A slice.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I want it to look like a
piece of meat. Yeah. Lila, please, Lila. We're trying to get Dale as a weekly class.
Well, you know what? The 2 of y'all.
Chopped is one that's like real stringy looking. Like it looks like a.
Do you mind doing a little media consulting with Lila after this, Dale?
It tastes the same.
I'm just going to ask Dale, do a little media consulting with you after this.
You know what? We're having words after this.
These are questions I did not expect.
That's why we don't tell them. That's why we don't prep you. All right. This is going to be a controversial question. Who is your favorite Cowboy coach?
Or who is, in your opinion, who is the best Dallas Cowboy coach in the history of the franchise?
We just talking head coaches, or
head coaches?
Head coaches.
Give me head coach, and then I'd love to hear an assistant coach.
To me, and again, only because I'm old, it's Tom Landry.
Yeah, it has to be, doesn't it?
Tom Landry.
There's no Jimmy Johnson without Tom Landry.
It'd be Tom Landry by far, then Jimmy Johnson, and then nobody after that.
Okay.
Are you sure Chan doesn't mix in there somewhere?
What about Wade? Wade?
Well, the fact that Wade Phillips and I look like one another, he said that when he first got out, he said he was actually at a gas station. And he said, "Oh, hey, you're Dale Hansen." And I looked, when he told me that, I said, that's not really good for either one of us.
Well, she told me we looked Hansen, and when you walked in, I said, what the hell is Wade doing here? No, not at all.
Parcells always didn't refer to me directly, but Jerry Jones told me this. He referred to me as, I just went brain dead. The guy that was in Cocoon.
Wilford Brimley.
No, I don't have a mustache. The guy the actual alien.
Brian Kinney. Brian Dennehy.
Dennehy.
Yes, I see that one.
Like
I see that.
Brian Dennehy for sure.
I wanted the guy from Coach to play me in a movie. And then I found out that he's an idiot, so I don't want him now. And it probably would have to be Brian Dennehy. Or Wilford Brimley, but I wouldn't shave the mustache.
I'm going to throw a name at you that you reminded me of back in the early 80s.
Early 80s.
You, Barry Judge.
Jerry
Do you remember Barry Judge? He wasn't he on KDFW when you were there?
No.
Back in those days, you reminded me of him.
That's a Google thing. We have to Google that one.
Yeah. What did he do?
He was a news guy.
Somebody's going to hate me for not remembering that.
Oh, he was.
I did the
commentary. He was commentary. He was on Dallas Morning News.
When you throw a name at me from the past, I'll give you the best example of how bad I am. at that station kickoff party I was telling you about, this woman walks up to me and she said, Dale, just want to introduce myself. I don't remember her name now. And I said, I said, you're with Channel 8. She goes, yes, what do you do? And she goes, I'm on the morning show. I anchor the morning show. I said, oh, okay. I said, how long have you been here? She goes, 6 years. And Sean Hamilton, my producer, was standing there and he goes, and there it is. I called an intern by name down in San Antonio one night, walking into a bar. Yeah. And I turned around and I said, hey, come on. And I called him by name and everybody just froze. And I said, what's that? And he said, we believe that's the first intern you've ever called by name. I'm horrific at it. I had a buddy of mine who's a golf pro, and he called everybody Bud. Hey, Bud, hey, Bud, hey, Bud, Bud. And Jim Brock was with the Silver Seal. We called everybody Haas. And he said, well, they did it because they can't remember names. Yeah. They go, hey, Haas. Well, it felt like and I've been trying to find something I can use.
Gizmo.
I'm horrific with names that I should remember, and this goes back to the arrogance, I guess, except for the people that had this direct impact on my life. Yeah. Their names, for whatever reason, seem to be burned into my brain. But if you were a coworker, I probably don't know your name.
I'm going to tackle you on the way out so you remember me.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
All right. Let me ask you a question. In your opinion, JFK assassination, was it done by a lone gunman, or is there a conspiracy behind it?
That debate about once a month with somebody. I still have. I'm really, really hung up on this one. I just find it almost impossible to believe that one man, especially that man, could pull that off. But where I'm at right now is that I find it harder to believe that nobody has said anything that would make you think it was anything but Lee Harvey Oswald. You follow me here?
Totally.
It's like the Watergate thing. I mean, Mark Felt's going to eventually come forward. Somebody at some point, lying on their deathbed, said, hey, you need to know this. I was the guy at the grassy knoll, or I'm the guy that brought in the bullets, or whatever. Now, as some of my buddies, and this is surprisingly, maybe because we live in Dallas, but this conversation does take up a big part of my life. You go through it and it just doesn't make, no, there's no way, and then you see the other side of it, and okay, it makes a little more sense. Jack Ruby walked in and shoots the guy, and a lot of people who supposedly knew about the conspiracy did seem to die rather quickly in some mysterious ways. But even then, where are you at on this?
Well, I started out big conspiracy theory. Then Gordon Keith came on. Again, I can't believe I'm saying that. Yeah. Gordon Keith came on our podcast, and he laid it out and said, how in the hell this one guy happens to be in the building, happens to not be working at that time, happens to work on the 6th floor, happens to be right where Tippett was, blah, 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 blah.
No, he worked in the building. Yeah. He goes to the 6th floor. He knows Kennedy's going to be coming down that street.
I was a conspiracy guy. Now I'm kind of like you. I don't know where to go, but.
I did. My biggest deal was, there was one thing that I really thought nailed it. That somebody supposedly they did a test. And they had like the best sharpshooters in the military, and none of them could fire off like 4 shots in 5 seconds or whatever it was. Yeah. And it was a bolt action rifle. Right. And yet this 26-year-old nut job who.
I'm like you. I can almost buy the lone gunman, but then Ruby kills him in front of a live television audience.
Yeah, but in those days you could.
I guess you could.
In those days, a guy that.
But Ruby happens to have mafia ties, the legit mafia ties. Yeah, There's so many layers you can peel away.
Yeah, but I still, and I'm with you. I mean, again, it wouldn't take much to convince me that it was a conspiracy.
Yeah, but nobody's let anything out.
Right? Nobody, other than this was no concrete. And again, like what Gordon said, I get it. I find it almost impossible to believe as well. But I do find it harder to believe that, especially with the reporters through the 60s and the 70s, the Warren Commission, I think, a little iffy, but still, somebody's going to find it. Yeah. There's going to be a Mark Felt. Yeah. There's going to be an unhappy secretary calling up about the football team. There's going to be a druggie who didn't get the money that he was promised, who's going to say, hey, and again, without that,
Yeah, eventually, like you said, someone's going to say something. That being said, when someone eventually does say something, please call me on that source on the SMU thing, okay? I want to be the person you eventually call, okay? Okay, last one. I'll let Lila, you ask this one, or do you want me to go with this?
You ask
Okay.
it. You ask it.
In your opinion, and who, if I asked you, Dale, who represents Dallas, who would you say?
oh my gosh.
Can't say Dale Hansen.
No. Wow, that's really good.
Yeah, someone's outside or someone's
Yeah,
watching
I
TV.
understand.
Yeah,
To me, when I think of Dallas, and again, since you're asking me,
right.
it's Roger Staubach.
Wow.
Okay.
First
Because-
different answer.
Roger Staubach, to me, represents everything that you hope we are. I've met, this way I always tell this story. I've met, and most of my connections are through sports, obviously. But I've met some of the greatest athletes in every sport. Some of the most absolute greatest athletes you could ever possibly imagine their physical skills. At the same time, I've met some of the most incredible human beings, some of the most decent family men, community-oriented men, athletes that are just the best of everything that you would want somebody to be. Very seldom does that line intersect. It just doesn't seem to collide very often. Roger Staubach does. Not the only one. But I am beyond convinced that Roger Staubach is maybe the most physically gifted, great athlete I know, who at the same time is the most incredible human being that I've ever had the opportunity to know. He just, I'm mesmerized by him, and I have been from the first time I ever met him. Yeah. He's what I think we all wish we were. He's not the greatest quarterback. And people say, "Well, wait a minute, you're slobbering all over Staubach. I thought you were Aikman, the guy." I said, "Well, yeah, Aikman is my guy, but I'll tell you what you do. You buy me a beer, I'll give you first pick, and I'll play with the other one.
Yeah, for sure.
You buy me a beer, I'll give you first choice. I'll take my chances with the other guy." And I can say that a lot. I mean, Dirk Nowitzki, but when I think of Dallas, and it's a little bit unfortunate that he's kind of on the
Tail
back
end.
burner of,
Yeah.
well, without question, he's coming up to the 2-minute warning like we all are eventually, But it does bother me that I think there's a whole element of our city that doesn't really realize what an incredible impact he had. Tom Landry, I think, and certainly in the day was represented, and again for the same reasons. Unbelievable football coach and a better human being,
Better person, yeah.
And while very, very, very few of us live up to that standard, I think most of us want to. Most of us aspire to that. Everybody I know falls short. And that's why I say I don't want to diminish, a lot of these people I'm talking about. But the best example is like Bill Bates. I think Bill Bates is just an unbelievable human being. But he wasn't a great player. He was a really good player, really good. But he wasn't a great player. So I kind of, I love playing that stupid game. Some of the greatest players, okay, they got feet of clay. That
Yeah.
And then some of the greatest human beings, and again, there's a lot of them on both sides. But he wasn't really that good. I mean, he wasn't that good. And then I look at Staubach.
He was everything. Yeah.
He was
businessman too, successful businessman. So I mean, he's done it all. So great
and suppressed the players' salaries for years.
Yeah.
Drew Pearson tells a great story. He went in to get a big raise. Harold Carmichael in Philadelphia was making like $450,000 a year, and Drew was making like $175,000. And he said, "Well, I think I'm worth at least $350,000. I mean, if you're not going to give me Harold Carmichael money, I mean, I'm Drew Pearson. I ought to get $350,000." And Tex Schramm looked at him and said, "Well, I only pay Roger $250,000. I sure as hell can't pay you more than I pay Roger." Yeah. And everybody went, "Roger, you got to get more money." Yeah. But Roger, he was building his empire.
Yeah, he was working for
and
Henry
he got his nice salary and called it a day. And again, just another example of why I just respect the heck out of him. Right. I mean, he's just great. He's funny. He's great family man. He's probably the only conservative Republican I know that I would put a sign in my yard to vote for him. And I told him this, whatever you want to run for. And by the way, I disagree with about everything you believe.
Right, but he's right. Yeah.
If we went down the litmus test of political questions, he and I would probably not agree about many.
Right.
And I would put a sign in my yard encouraging people to vote for Roger Staubach. And that's what we really don't have enough of.
Not at all. That's character matters, and he's
it used to.
Yeah, it used to.
It used to.
Well, Dale, I could go on, like I said, all day. For today, we're going to negotiate something with Lila here. We're not going to let this go away. You left the door open for more. Well, I thank you again so much for being here. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us. Like I said, it was a bucket list thing for me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dale.
I always enjoyed your sports cast, and after having spent a couple hours with you, you actually become more of an inspiration than you were before. So.
Well, as the lovely Mrs. Hansen said, when I told her I was going to go do this podcast today, she goes, "Well, it is your favorite subject."
Yes.
Well, and I want to personally thank you because I reached out to you and you quickly responded back and said yes. And in my former career life, one of many, I was in commercial real estate, and you helped me out there. I reached out to you to help us, for you to be, for lack of a better term, the MC for our Christmas party for North Texas Commercial Association Realtors back in the mid-90s, 3 years in a row. So I really appreciate you coming on today, and Mark does as well.
I love it. I love doing all that kind of stuff. And it was also quite honestly, it was also part of my pick them off one at a time. Yeah. If I can make somebody laugh or make somebody have a good time at a Christmas banquet, there's a pretty good chance they'll tune in that night and watch me on the sportscast. And then hopefully I can get them to come back again. So, but I do it. I used to do a lot of it back in the day, and I loved it. It kept the grocery bill at home down quite a bit too. So that was awesome.
Well, can you make a promise to Sunday come back and see us?
Yeah. After you figure out how you're going to handle all this nonsense I've been throwing out.
Yeah.
I've still got stories.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dale.
Thank you.
We will be back next time on Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas.
Thank you, Dale.